Okay. Are we all seated? Can I request everybody to take their seats, please? Thank you. Okay, let's start this again, shall we? Good morning. Come on, a little bit louder and with a little bit more oomph. Good morning. Thank you. Welcome to the third and final day of the Global Conference on Sustainable Livestock Transformation. Now, for this morning session, we're going to be talking about better life, which, after all, is something we all want, right? Now, if you haven't been here for the past 2 days, let me introduce myself again. My name is Thin, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Now, over the past 2 days, we have heard about the importance of livestock to consumers and to livestock producers. We've also heard about the environmental impacts of livestock. We've also heard the fact that we need more sustainable production methods that will make it, much more environmentally friendly as well as equitable. None of this will be possible if we can't provide a better life for food producers, or in this case, people who rear livestock. We're talking about women and youth, we're talking about pastoralists, we're talking about small-scale livestock producers who feed their communities, but who very often have struggled accessing resources and markets. Now, this morning, we have a fantastic lineup of keynote speakers and panelists who are going to tell us how we can do this. But first, a few housekeeping notes. As always, please make sure that your phone and your electronic devices are in silent mode. We have translation in 6 UN languages, so we request all the speakers to speak clearly and slowly. This session is being webcast live, so hello to anybody who's joining us online, and it will also be available for viewing later on. A very important note, there will be coffee and refreshments outside the plenary from 9:30 till 10:30. Now, if you're using social media, the hashtag is Sustainable Livestock. That's Sustainable Livestock in one word with hashtag. Now, before we begin this session, we're going to start with a short video describing what better life is. Can we have the video, please?
A better life for all is the ultimate result of sustainable livestock transformation. Livestock support the livelihood of hundreds of millions of farmers, from small-scale farmers with few animals of different species to large-scale farmers. Millions more along the value chain rely on livestock for their living, as it creates employment in feed production, animal health services, processing, transporting, and marketing. Livestock are ubiquitous. They support livelihoods in all natural environments, from deserts to high mountains. In small-scale production systems, as well as in arid and semi-arid areas, livestock also acts as an insurance mechanism and buffer, making households more resilient to natural and human-induced shocks. Livestock also directly supports the livelihoods of women who are often trusted to raise and manage livestock, such as poultry and other small stock sheep, goats, and milking cows. The anticipated growing demand for animal source foods in low-income countries provides major opportunities for livestock keepers to tap into market opportunities and improve their livelihoods. Financial services such as credit are enabling people in the livestock sector to invest in improved technologies, infrastructure and inputs, fostering a sustainable transformation of livestock production. Access to affordable and quality inputs such as animal feed, animal health services, vaccines, equipment and technical know-how ensures healthy and productive animals. Strengthening market linkages and value addition improves access to higher value markets fosters fair trade practices, and increases income generating potential. The sustainable transformation of livestock systems will enhance the multitude of benefits that livestock provide to the livelihoods of men, women, and youth, creating millions of additional jobs along the value chain, and ultimately contribute to promoting sustainable agri-food systems, reducing poverty and hunger through investment, policy support, and rural transformation, fostering inclusivity. The first global conference on sustainable livestock transformation also provides a forum to forge partnerships and identify options and solutions to sustainably transform livestock.
Thank you very much. I'm now delighted to invite the chair for this session, Arianna Giuliodori, Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization, for her opening remarks. Now, Arianna has a long experience working with farmers and food producers, and including spending a decade with Coldiretti, the Italian Farmers Organization. Arianna?
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be here today. And welcome also to those that are the bravest and are here so early. I know just the few of us, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of energy in the room because this is a powerful session. And we've just heard from the video what Better Life is about. I will not go back into that, but I would like to ask you to pause for a moment. I am here this morning chairing this session on behalf of the farmers of the world. And I would like to ask you to change the perspective for a second. Let's use this session to put the farmers, the pastoralists, the herders, the youth, the women, at the very center, not only of the conversation, but of the transformation, of the decision-making process, of the solutions we are going to identify. I am sorry that the youth is not yet back into this room this morning, but I am so happy that the young representatives of the livestock sector are passionately discussing about what is needed, because it's definitely about them. It's about their potential, their freedom to choose. It's about their future, some has said, but no, it's about their present, because what they're going to do today will shape the food systems of tomorrow. And it's about women. It's about those amazing human beings that give life, that ensure that life can keep on going on this planet, that feed their families, their communities, and that too often are bearing such a big burden on their shoulders, are not recognized for what they're doing. But again, you heard me say a lot, it is about them. But too often, these conversations happen without them. So it's not enough for us as farmers' representatives to see that people are discussing about what we should do, what we shouldn't do. We heard a lot of do's and don'ts. We heard a lot about how much farmers are important for this transformation, but the time has come for us as actors in this transformation to step up and to share our knowledge, our wisdom, our solutions with all other stakeholders. The time has come to revert this paradigm, to put the people at the center of food systems, the economic actors that the farmers are at the very heart of decision making. This is the only way to succeed not only in the sustainable livestock transformation, but also if we have a hope to make the All Agenda 2030 achievement a success. That's our only hope. Let's put the pastoralists, the herders, the farmers, the people, the family farmers at the heart of this conversation. Thank you. But farmers will never do it on their own. This is not what I'm pledging for. The time is ripe for all stakeholders to join hands and forces. And this is also the beauty of this session. And I am really looking forward to hearing from the experts, the practitioners that will share how we can succeed in getting a better life for all. Thank you very much.
Grazie mille, Arianna, for that very powerful and strong opening remarks, which I think sets the tone for the rest of the session. It's now my pleasure to invite Noi Paulina Selepe, who's the chairperson of Lesotho Young Farmers Association and a full-time livestock farmer. Now, Noi Paulina will tell us about the key roles that youth and women play in the livestock sector and how to empower them.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And with all due respect, allow me to observe all the protocol. As mentioned earlier, I am Noi Selepe Makgetha, a livestock farmer from the Mountain Kingdom of Lesotho. I have been mandated this morning to come and share with you how best we can empower young people and women through livestock. And maybe let me start first by answering a question of why do we need to involve the youth in the livestock sector. Despite the significant potential and broadly accepted importance of agriculture on the globe, the farmer base, including livestock farmers, is aging. For example, in the Southern Africa, the average of a semi-commercial and commercial farmer is currently over 60 years of age. And there is a growing concern that agriculture activities will definitely decline with this aging cohort. The Southern region faces a growing unemployment crisis, and that calls for an agency to create more and even better jobs in the rural areas. Revitalizing the rural economies and promoting decent rural employment and workforce development to reduce inequality and distress migration and end poverty and hunger, hence why there's a need to involve the young people in the sector. Due to the complexity of livestock management, information and knowledge, science-based and technology-driven, there is a necessity for new skills and capabilities which reside mainly in the young than the aging farming population. Despite the potential that livestock holds for addressing youth and employment, the sector is still struggling to attract and retain a significant number of young people for several reasons. Maybe the first one could be that the youth perceive livestock as unprofitable and devoid of advanced innovations and technologies. They still regard it as a simple process of growing livestock for food. That is so unlikely to reap sizable profits for them as compared to the other industries. Secondly, given their lack of experience in the sector and networks, as well as the legal regulatory networks, environment, the youth generally lack access to key resources and services such as land, financial instruments, and markets for livestock and livestock products as such. The livestock industry does not present an easy and attractive career choice for them. Lastly, lack of technical skills and business acumen, due in part to weak education systems and limited agricultural education, limits the ability to the youth to farm optimally and run sustainable livestock enterprises. The challenge is therefore to assist a growing youth population to overcome these barriers and run sustainable livestock enterprises. The youth and women should be encouraged to participate in the growth and transformation of livestock sector, and thus promote creating a decent employment. In this regard, it is the opinion of FAO and other relevant stakeholders that the young generation is an appropriate target for commercialization given their relatively high education levels. Young people and women participation in livestock management has the potential to achieve significantly more, both economically and socially, than just employment creation. They should be considered as an important catalyst in transforming the livestock sector. The inclusion of youth and women in this sector presents a unique opportunity to reap a demographic dividend. They are a group of increased connectivity, especially the youth, and access to information and more inclined to adapt to an ever-changing livestock sector. A youth-focused approach to livestock development will aid more inclusive growth than what we have seen in the past decades. Thus, we still stand to enjoy the catalytic economic growth, both spurred by and contributing to increased employment in agriculture. If a generation of young people and women can be incentivized to participate in the agricultural sector, thus reducing the average farming age, Africa and the globe as a whole can capitalize on a unique position to address global growth in food demand. Therefore, greater effort is required to address issues of commercial viability, negative perceptions of the livestock industry among the young people. Then the issue of inequality of women in accessing natural and production resources. Women's livestock production is limited by their ability to access land, credit, inputs, and livestock advisory. Most women livestock farmers do not have a formal education and technical training, so this hinders their ability to adapt to modern farming practices, make informed decisions, and access markets. Ladies and gentlemen, women face gender-based constraints that limit their decision-making, power, and control over livestock resources as compared to men. Discriminatory cultural norms as well and traditions may also restrict their participation in the sector. Poor infrastructure such as roads and market facilities limit women's ability to transport and sell their livestock products and livestock as well. They often struggle to access markets and face challenges in reaching buyers and negotiating fair prices. Finally, what then should we do to empower women in the livestock sector? We have to do profiling and publicizing women's success stories in leadership and commercially oriented agriculture. Advocating for equal access to resources and opportunities with both public and private sector institutions. We also have to be promoting women economic empowerment through various approaches, including competitions, targeted funds, training, attachments, mentorship, conferences, and workshops. We also have to start supporting targeted procurement policies to promote economic empowerment of women in value chains. We also have to be forming partnerships and alliances with the private sector, development agencies, and others to promote economic empowerment of women. Lastly, we have to be monitoring and analyzing the impact of policies and programs from a gender perspective. Madam Moderator, please allow me to conclude by sharing a short story of two young livestock farmers who were herding their cattle near an open wetland. And unfortunately, they were not aware that there was a big hole down that wetland that was digged with a purpose to collect water for the dry seasons that were approaching at that time. One day, one of their cow fell in that hole, and they struggled the whole day with all measures possible to take it out, but with no luck. So they decided to fill that hole with soil so that no more animals can fall in there. So every time they poured in that soil, the cow took advantage and shook off that dust and stepped on it until they saw it walking unharmed from that hole. What am I trying to say this morning to you, ladies and gentlemen? There are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of constraints. There are a lot of ups and downs in the livestock sector. But can we all stand together, shake them off, shake the dust off, and find strategies on how best we can move on with the livestock sector unharmed? Please, let us include young people. Let us include women in the livestock sector. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for that, Paulina. That was a very powerful and moving, example that you gave, and a call to action to everybody. Does anybody have any questions, any specific queries that you might have related to what Paulina has presented and talked about, or the challenges that faced particularly by women and young farmers? Basic things like access to land, to credit, that really, really affect their ability to participate fully in the agriculture sector. No questions? Oh, Robin, please.
Lovely. Good morning. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'm Robin Alders, and I wanted to share with you that the average age of farmers in Australia at the moment is 63. So my question to you is, how are the youth and the young farmers coming together across the world? Because we need you to organise. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that question. We are organized per regions. We are organized per countries. We are trying by all means to come as an organized entity into the livestock sector. Yes.
Okay, if there are no questions, thank you very much, Paulina, for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Hindu Omaru Ibrahim, President of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad. Now, Hindu is a strong advocate for the rights of Indigenous peoples and for environmental protection. Now, she's going to share her experiences on the importance of pastoralism in different parts of the world.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a great pleasure to see you. Even the room is not full like yesterday, I feel a little bit frustrated as we are talking about the most important part of our journey here. I really would love to have all the ministers to be there. Anyway, I hope that the organizer, thank you for the support. I hope that the organizer will share that with the ministers because they must listen what we are saying. But I'm saluting my minister who is here already for me. Thank you. So firstly, thanks so much for organizing this first conference on the livestock. It's really very important for our life because we are going to have next year as the year of camels. And of course, 2026 is the years of rangeland and also pastoralists. So for me, coming from an organization called it also WAMIP, in addition to my own organization, it is very important to announce that from the beginning. So today I'm going to share with you the challenge and also more the opportunities of the indigenous pastoralists around the world. But I will be focusing on the pastoralist life that can contribute to a better life for people and planet. I will give you the example of where I come from. When you look at these pictures, I'm coming from those communities who are cattle herders, nomadic and semi-nomadic, living across Chad, Cameroon, Niger, Nigeria, Central African Republic, and even Sudan and now to DRC. Before the colonization, it used to be our open land where we are navigating around all those places. Of course, with the colonization, I ended up being born in Chad, call it Chadian. I do have my cousin, Cameroonian, Central African Republic, etc. We are the people of the land. That's the most important. As indigenous peoples, we live and depend from the land. And that's how we are protecting also this land. So being a pastoralist, it is not a commodity. It is not a business for us. But it is a living in harmony with the nature. It is keeping the balance between us and the nature that we are living and depending from it. So for me, I give you just one anecdote. I went to Washington, D.C. for the spring summer meeting. And then, as you know, in the U.S., so you have the lunch always, sandwiches, salad, sandwiches, salad. After 1 week, as pastoralist, I feel like I need my meat. So then, one of my colleagues invited me to a barbecue. And he said, I'm inviting you for a grass-fed beef barbecue. I'm like, what the hell is this? If the beef are not eating the grass, what else are they eating? I was so unhurried to ask him. And when I reached there, I asked him. And he said, like, well, maybe in your community, the beef can eat grass, but in many parts of the world, it's not the case. So it is the beef that are destroying the forest to do the agriculture to feed the beef. It is the beef who are land grabbing. And then the exceptional about the indigenous pastoralists, our beef are 100% grass-fed. So if you want to have the best burger of your life, eat the indigenous beef. However, we are getting a threat of climate change. If you can look at from this map, just from 1960 to now, how much the pastoralist movement who are transbordering to change their own life. And that impacts our water. Water is the most important for a pastoral person. And you can see immediately if there is not enough water and you have to feed your cattle, or if there is a lot of water and it will end up with a bigger flood. And this is a bigger threat for the communities, a bigger threat for the country, as I can say, because in Chad you can see 24% of the GDP on agriculture is based on the livestock. 14% of the national GDP is based on all the global GDPs of Chad. And around Sahel, maybe 40% of the GDPs depend from the pastoralists. So we are the people who are making the economy. So that means we are the solutions. We are the peoples who are putting the carbon in the soil, who are fertilizer, and who are also the door of the desert. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples around that. This is the first example. You can look at from the scientific study how we are carbon capturing from the atmosphere, putting it in the soil. So even we are not carbon positive in our production, but we are more than that. We are the one who are fertilizing the land for the agriculture people who can do a better farm. It's much better than what the industrialized agriculture can do. So we are the solution that people can learn from us if they wanted to fight climate change in a very fragile ecosystem. We are also not only the cattle herders. There are indigenous peoples who are camel herders. But there are also indigenous peoples who are ranger herders in the ice, opposite from my own land. And one of the small anecdote, so people say like, oh, we love to go to the Sapmi indigenous land during the summer, but there are a lot of mosquitoes. We like, well, you must understand how the ecosystem functions. So the mosquito help the rangers to do not overgraze. It's help them to move around all the places. And when the winter come back, so they have more grass, they do not have to dig very deeply in order to feed all the rangers. So each species of the ecosystem count in the nature. And as well, here is the second examples. Our way of living is help us to learn a lot from our Mother Earth, especially the environment. This is the two examples, very short, of the two places, 100% nomadic and semi-nomadic, that I wanted to share with you. Maybe in the Western knowledge, people have 4 seasons. But in the indigenous knowledge, pastoralist knowledge, our seasons are ecosystemic based. Those who are living between the Sahel and the desert, we have 5 seasons. Those who are living between savannas and tropical forests, we have 7 seasons. And each season are based on the information that our cattle are giving us, or the birds are giving us, or the clouds are giving us. It's help us to better plan our life, to be more resilient to the climate, but to also adapt to all the weather that is changing in different places. If it's raining, we know how to hide because we don't have shelter as here. And if it's going to be hot, we know how to hide. And those seasons are very important. We work over 6 years on it with UNESCO to come up with those calendars. My other example is very exciting. I really love this one. It is how we can combine science, technology, and traditional knowledge of the communities in order to build the resilience and help even the government to take a right decisions. So this is the participatory mapping. So I use a satellite imageries. I gather with the communities and even the best satellite in the space. cannot give the best knowledge when you come to the pastoral communities. They look at it as just a bigger repair. They put a knowledge there about all the different water. They put the knowledge about all the different species of the green grass and how they are navigating around the place. And at the end of the day, we digitalize the map, as you can see here. It's helped us to look at where are the corridor of movement, where are the agriculture area. It can mitigate the conflict over the resources. It can help the government to plan a very inclusive adaptation plan, or even the sustainable development goals, because they can see where are the schools, where are the hospitals, etc. So those are the best way of using the technology, the traditional knowledge and the science, and involving the communities to better be the part of the decision making of our life. My final example is how we can use all this wisdom, all those knowledge of the communities to really take a right decisions. We did that at the Paris Agreement, where we have like the 5 references of indigenous peoples and recognition, finally, of the knowledge of the communities, including the pastoralist communities, who are very crucial for the government to take a right decisions. We also get 20% of the budget of the framework of the biodiversity conventions to be going to the communities directly in order to better plan their life. So how we can all transform that in a very concrete project at home, at the community level, to give the land right, as my sister said, to give the young people a future where they can stay at home but doing the pastoralists in a very sustainable way, but also to give the very fragile government of our countries to be the leaders, to lead with an action of our traditional knowledge. So here are the life of the pastoralists, and I hope that you get inspired from what we are putting in the tables. So we are the solution, we are not a problem. We are a value add, so use us as partners, not as beneficiaries. And as partners, we can take a right decision together and act together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hindu. Another very powerful keynote address. Partners, not beneficiaries. I think that is a very, very important point. I see that there's actually somebody who wants to comment. Yes, please, go ahead.
My name is Oscar Castañeda. Okay, thank you. My name is Oscar Castañeda. I'm with the Heifer International, and I'm perhaps the person that is more removed from being a pastoralist. However, I just wanted to congratulate you on delivering a vibrant and exciting presentation. You are making us wishing to not only to become pastoralists, but at least to understand what you do and how you are part of the solution. We need the excitement and the energy that you have delivered be part of the call to action for everybody. So I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman in blue shirt.
Sí, voy a hablar en español hindú. Mi nombre es Pablo Frer, vengo de Sudamérica, del Gran Chaco sudamericano de Argentina. Somos parte de una alianza regional latinoamericana de pastores, Pastor Américas, y junto con Hindu y mucha gente que está por aquí que podría levantar la mano de WAMIP, somos la Alianza Global por el Pastoralismo, junto con Hindu y mucha gente que está aquí. Decir que nuestro sector se ve como en desaparición, bien decía Hindu, ¿no? Y a veces las políticas de gobierno no siempre nos ayudan a crecer. Producimos proteína animal, como ella mencionó, y alimentos en muchos lugares donde nadie puede producir alimentos. Lo estamos llevando al mundo. En el caso de FAO tenemos un centro de conocimientos sobre pastoralismo, sería bueno que lo visiten, el Pastoralist Knowledge Hub. Y Hindu, quizá tú nos puedas dar algún ejemplo al plenario, algún caso, alguna política concreta que vos puedas decir cómo los gobiernos podrían ayudar a visibilizar nuestro sector, a ser reconocido como creadores de riqueza y a promover nuestros sistemas de vida. Quizá algún ejemplo, alguna experiencia que puedas contarnos. Muchísimas gracias porque pudimos estar presentes en esta conferencia.
Thank you. Before you respond, Hindu, let's get one final one from Jimmy Smith. Jimmy? Yes.
Thank you very much. These two presentations were particularly inspiring, and I really enjoyed both of them. And particularly this one. I've spent a good bit of my time trying to promote investments and understanding of sown and pastoralism. And often I will find ministers in the countries who say that's an old system, it's backward, we need to get rid of it. Are you making progress in trying to get leadership, ministers, politicians to understand that you're part of the solution rather than the problem that they have perceived for so long?
Thank you so much for my brother who appreciate. I really appreciate you too. And thanks you for Pablo Freire and Jimmy Smith for your cautions. So both are coming to the same, how the government can recognize and how they can also include the pastoralists. So firstly, the government of Chad understood in one thing. And the strategy that we use is we take a scientist from the ministers to the communities who are nomadic, and we show them how we are capable to predict the weather without having a cell phone or without having a meteorological divided as gadget. We were sitting just at the communities with the expert of climate change, and then communities start packing their stuff, and then they say, Hindu, are we moving? I'm like, no, we are not moving. It's going to rain in the next hour. They're like, oh, the cloud is nothing, it's fine. In the next 30 minutes, a heavy rain starts coming. And you can see how the scientists are running, hiding under trees. And we are all like sitting down and looking at them and laughing. At the end of this rain, they come like, how do you know it's going to rain? We're like, well, we observe the small ants who are taking their eggs in their nests. We have the wind who is coming from this corner. The wind is heavy, little bit cold, then that means it's going to rain in maximum 2 hours. So then we start the dialogue with the ministry. And at the end of the day, in Chad, you can look at the National Adaptation Plan, who have a paragraph that recognizes the knowledge of pastoralists as one of the best knowledge in our National Adaptation Plan. And we have the collaboration with the Minister of Livestock, who is here, with the Minister of Environment, as the indigenous pastoralists there. So I think what they need the evidence. And it is us who can pull them in our communities and show them the evidence. And that's why we can use the science knowledge and traditional knowledge in order to really make it more workable. And as you said, Pablo, for the knowledge hub here, FAO do have a knowledge hub, but they do have also a division of indigenous peoples. So how we can have more evidence from the two constituencies who can show that in each FAO conferences. There is need of collaboration, not only with the indigenous peoples at the national level, but within the UN institutions, within the UN divisions, in order to give voice to the indigenous communities. We can talk for ourselves. If we talk for ourselves, of course, we can convince politicians, we can collaborate with the scientists, and of course, we can see how the life and livelihood of the pastoralists can be changing the life of the communities. So convincing them, it's one thing. But as you said, Jimmy, it is very hard work. But we are not the problem. We are the solution. If they wanted to put us in a site to do not be a pastoralist, the ecosystem will be degraded. The conflict between communities will be more high, the food insecurity, etc. But if we are nomadic, sharing the land, as we did the participatory mapping, sharing the resources, I think we are the future. We are not the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hindu. Thank you. Thank you again. Now, rounding up the trio of amazing female speakers is Robin Alders, Honorary Professor at the Australian National University. Now, Robin has more than 3 decades of experience working with small-scale producers in Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Oceania. She's going to tell us how we can help small-scale livestock producers access resources, extension services, and social protection. Robin.
Thanks so much. And wow, what a privilege to follow on from these visionary women. Thank you, FAO, for the opportunity. Buongiorno, good morning, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. In particular, I do want to thank the farmers, the producers, the pastoralists in the room today. It's great that you could be here, and also it's great that all of your colleagues have been working hard to feed us all so that we can sit in these rooms and have these important discussions. I'm going to try and use these 10 minutes to convince you that not only is it right that small-scale producers, that family farmers have a better life, but that by ensuring they have better lives, we're all going to have a better life. So, as the title suggests, we're going to look at the importance of enhancing access by small-scale livestock producers to resources, markets, and services. Across the world, there are hundreds of millions of small-scale producers, small-scale family farmers. And as is written there, the greatest number are in low and middle-income countries. But I want to hasten to mention that there are also small-scale and family farmers in high-income countries. And these small-scale producers, these family farmers in low, middle, and high-income countries are often the ones that care for and maintain the genetic diversity of livestock that is going to be so important moving forward. So if our countries do not support these groups, we place at risk the very diversity that's going to be so important for our future. As the 2 presenters have mentioned this morning, small-scale livestock producers so important in the production of food, of fibre, of livelihoods in rural areas, crucial contributions to human health and well-being, and for the maintenance of healthy environments. It's so important that we have mentioned the Indigenous communities and those Indigenous communities that do raise livestock. Their thousands of years of knowledge are going to be quite crucial as we move forward. Also, as mentioned, it's often the small stock that in many settings are cared for, are raised and maintained by women, by youth, and they are really important contributions. They help people in times of emergency to pay for medicine, to send children to school, to provide that crucial meal for a visiting guest. Really, really important contributions that should be recognised across all of our countries. It's also important to think that in addition to food and nutritious animal source food, these small-scale livestock producers are critical to our lives and to rural communities. It's those family farmers that make rural communities what they are, and they're often deeply embedded in culture, in religious activities, and they also contribute indirectly to particular activities for mixed farmers, providing traction and providing organic fertilisers that have been highlighted throughout this conference. However, small-scale producers face a number of challenges, a number of barriers, and often they lack the voice, the bargaining power that they need to be heard, to be able to negotiate fair contracts and fair working conditions. They tend to have less access to productive resources, to credit, to knowledge, to information, and to markets. And this is the case particularly for women and men in a number of countries, to women and youth, sorry. And as our first speaker highlighted this morning, we need to incentivise youth to see livestock as a future and as their present. Very powerful presentation on pastoralists, and often they are undervalued And I think part of the problem is also the language we use to discuss these issues. Often when we talk about pastoralists in English, we use the term nomadic, and that has been used over the centuries by colonising forces to dispossess people of their land, because they say they're nomadic. They don't necessarily belong to this land. But nomads moved and moved with the resources as they were available, whereas those of us who are sedentary livers, practice sedentary living, expect resources to come to us. And that has a cost, and it has a cost for the environment. So I think as we're having these discussions, as we're involving all of our different production systems, we also should use the diversity of language and knowledge and insights that their language bring to enable us to truly understand the benefits of their systems. So what we want as we go forward, not to look at those challenges, we want to look at equitable, small-scale livestock production and 21st century solutions that have the potential to reverse the trends, the barriers, and to contribute to sustainable agri-food systems. And here, when I talk about 21st century innovations, I'm not necessarily referring to digital innovations. I'm not necessarily referring to those technologies. It is about the willingness to innovate, to listen, and to understand. And maybe it's going to be drawing on those centuries, thousands of year-old traditions that are going to help us tackle the challenges we face in the 21st century. So, 5 solutions for you to consider. The first being access to productive resources. We do need to have equitable, inclusive and responsible and safe livestock value chains. People, small-scale producers, family farmers need access to input and output markets, access to fair credit arrangements, to be able to do value addition that is appropriately recognised. Now, globally, we're speaking frequently about circular economies, and yet many of the principles that are recognised there as being so important are already practiced by small-scale, by family farmers, but they are not yet valued. So we need to be able to document those values and the multiple benefits that these systems have to ensure that these producers are appropriately rewarded for the work and the contributions they're making on behalf of us all. We need to have that enhanced competitiveness, and it is that ability to tell the story, to talk about the real value, not only of the product that you're seeking to sell or to purchase, but what lies behind that particular product. And to be able to have access to inclusive, relevant and trusting capacity development. And this is a challenge. We all talk about capacity development as it's a big gap. But often, some of the capacity development that's been offered has been the idea of an outsider who hasn't necessarily understood the system. So we come, we build capacity in what we think is a good idea, but it doesn't necessarily fit with those local systems. So having capacity development that is developed in collaboration with those producers, with those people who know their systems, know what's feasible, is going to be critically important. And it could be that we're talking about capacity development for policymakers rather than producers. Certainly access to veterinary services and extension services is critical. Across the world today, too many animals continue to die of vaccine-preventable diseases. It's not acceptable. It's an animal welfare issue. It's a direct issue for human health, because as every animal dies from a vaccine-preventable disease, that's less access to animal-sourced food, and importantly, it also makes it nigh impossible to do sensitive surveillance. When your animals die frequently, if there is a new disease that comes in, emerging infectious disease that also kills your animal, how are you going to pick the difference? You'll only be able to have swift detection of new and emerging diseases if you have control of those diseases that are endemic and that are killing animals. We need to get this message across to our public health colleagues, to those who work in One Health. Vaccinating animals should be a right, and the percentages, the coverage of those herds and those populations needs to be much better. Our government public veterinary services need to work more effectively with private animal health and production health services, be they private veterinarians, paraprofessionals, community animal health workers. We need to work together more effectively. Certainly access to social protection is really important, and there's been excellent work done in this space by the Livestock Emergency Guidelines and Standards. If you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend it to you. And I'll simply give you one example from Bangladesh in the cyclone prevention areas, where it was the Disaster Risk Management Department, the ministry that worked with communities, who said that we don't just want shelters from cyclones for our people. What's the point of surviving the cyclone if our livelihoods have been destroyed? So now those shelters are for people and for their livestock. This is a really practical example, but done by the disaster management community, showing that importance of that cross-sectoral engagement. Certainly we've had presentations this week on livestock insurance approaches. It's going to be critically important to have systems that work for small-scale and family farmers. And yes, those policy environments, we all know they're important, so easy to say, so easy to talk about, and yet getting that real engagement from my country to many countries, it is very hard for farmers and producers to sit as equals, as partners, as those policy discussions are happening. It needs to be inclusive. We need farmers, producers and pastoralists to be at the table as those policies are being reviewed, revised and redesigned. An important contribution by FAO is currently being undertaken. Following the COAG meeting last year, there was a request made to FAO to consult with member countries on the importance of developing an international instrument aimed at guiding dialogue, policy processes and actions at the national, regional and global levels to enhance the role of small-scale livestock production in sustainable development. I encourage you all to engage with this process. It's going to be critically important as we move forward. And as we do move forward, to think about this One Health, another term that we've used a lot, and I'm so pleased that my colleague from Chad also mentioned this understanding that Indigenous people have. One Health is the term that we in the West have come up with. Indigenous people have understood for thousands of years that you cannot have human health, you cannot have animal health if you don't have environmental health. So this is really critically important, having these synergistic actions across and involving production units, value chains, policy and instrument. But I would go further, we also need to involve education, human health. All of these key sectors need to have that common vision of what it means to have functioning, healthy, safe food systems. And what we need to underpin that is research that's going to bring research and development partners to work once again in the field with the people who know the systems best, the farmers, the producers, the pastoralists. And we do need co-creation and joint evaluation of innovations and technologies that are tailored to specific needs and circumstances of small-scale producers and the environment in which they live. And for those of you involved with development projects, this means putting money in to go back and do your evaluation after 5 years and after 10 years. Because when there's money flowing, you can always make things look good. It's when you go back after the external funding has disappeared, you see whether or not it is actually making a contribution or making no change or possibly going backwards. So these are the suggestions that I leave you with. Thank you very much, and thanks to those who contributed to the presentation.
Thanks very much, Robin. We have time for a very short question, very short. I see that there is, and please make it relevant to what Robin has presented, because we are actually running a little bit late. So if you could keep it short, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Robin. It's Gareth Salmon from Sebi Livestock in Edinburgh University. I just had I wonder if you can comment on a future where small-scale producers access global markets, more resources, and potentially evolve, and the sector evolves, and some may be left behind, some may scale up, and what the pros and cons of that future might look like?
I think we're all wondering what the future is going to look like. Certainly there are opportunities for technologies to help some producers connect with markets further away. I would hasten to add that right now there are many local markets that are underserved because those livestock producers are underserved. I would love to see a situation where household food security, local community food security is well served. Then we can think about those value adding going to more premium markets, but we need a balanced system. And if we've learnt anything from COVID-19, we have learned that when transport links shut down, when global chains become challenged, it's those local food producing units that were so critically important. We need to place a higher value on them while also looking for those expanded opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you. Can we give a round of applause to Robin and to all the three amazing female keynote speakers, please? Now, we're going to go to the next segment, which is the first panel discussion for this morning. May I ask our experts to come onto the stage, please? Ilse, Abebe, and Sam. And now, please come onto the stage. Thank you. Now, while they're coming up, just brief announcement. There is going to be a FAO Global Forum on Animal Feed and Feed Regulators in November here at the FAO headquarters, 14th and 15th of November. So if you're interested in feed issues, keep a lookout for that. Please. Great. Let me just introduce you to all of our panelists. To my immediate right is Abebe Hale Gabriel, who is the Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Africa for the FAO. In the middle is Ilse Kolla Rolofsson, founder of the League for Pastoral Peoples and Indigenous Livestock Development in Germany, as well as a co-founder of India's first micro-camel dairy. And last but definitely not the least, we have Samuel Devasagayam, who is the Director of Livestock and Aquaculture at the Agriculture Development Program for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Welcome, everybody. Ilse, let me start with you. We have heard that as countries industrialize, the number of small-scale livestock producers tend to go down. Is there a different path for low and middle income countries as they continue to develop? And this middle path, should we look at it because there are benefits to encouraging the continued existence of small-scale herders?
I would really hope so, because looking at the high unemployment rates in a lot of these low and middle income countries, I think it's vital to enable smallholders. And so the social benefits of having smallholders and pastorals in your country, and supporting them, they are very evident, but it's also going to have a lot of benefits in terms of national autonomy and in terms of environmental sustainability. Now, pastoralists are, pastoralism is a totally solar-powered system. It's a livestock production system that does not require fossil fuels. It makes use of native biodiversity. It does not depend on industrialized feed production. It just transforms what is already there into really highly valuable meat and milk. And it's actually the most efficient way of producing protein. You see, in the industrialized country, a lot of protein, human edible protein, is already fed to animals, whereas in the pastoral system, they use waste. You know, they transform vegetation that nobody wants, that nobody cares for, into those foods. So they have amazing benefits. And let's also realize that pastorals actually manage a much larger part of agricultural land than farmers do, because 2/3 of agricultural land is actually not suitable for crop cultivation. So they're amazed. They are really important, not just in Chad, but I mean all over the world. I mean, Hindu showed the reindeer herders, and she showed the people in Chad, but we find pastoralists all over the world. You know, they keep yaks and alpacas and camels and cattle and sheep and goat and so on. So they have a much larger importance than they are really given. And the other point is the national autonomy also. If you start keeping large holdings of animals in one place, you come to depend on imports from other countries to feed these animals. And we've seen during the lockdown, and as Robin mentioned, that this can easily be interrupted in these uncertain times. So I really urge countries to support their smallholders and their pastoralists, and we need to realize the importance of pastoralism.
Thank you very much, Elsa. I think it's a really great point that you make in terms of both the autonomy as well as their role in ensuring a sustainable ecosystem, right? But in order for them to get more support, there needs to be somebody advocating for them. They need to be empowered, right? And Samuel, can I come to you next? Because farmer organizations are some of those organizations that can do that role. And, does your organization actually support farmer organizations or the establishment of some of these groups?
So we work with, especially in India, with camel pastoralists.
Anyway, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting us to participate. I come from an organization which was founded on the belief that all lives have equal value, and therefore, wherever it's lived should have the chance to live a healthy and productive life. So on a day where we are celebrating or thinking about better life, it's a great opportunity to be part of this. Talking of farmer organizations, yes, they are and can be extremely empowering to farmers. But what we tend to do is, first of all, rather than asking, taking the tool, using a hammer to look for nails kind of thing, we look for why farmer organization is the best tool to solve a problem. And secondly, how the farmer organization could, as Robin mentioned, beyond the project period or funded period, how they can sustain that solution financially in a sustainable way and scale that solution. So it's the why and the how. It's very important just not create farmer organization for every problem that we can find. So, and I like to share sort of 3 examples of farmer organizations we have supported. With Heifer International, we have got colleagues here in East Africa Dairy Development. We had Milk Hubs, which was a farmer organization that helped 230,000 families to increase the quality of milk, the quantity of milk, and access to markets. And they were able to access continuous improvement in their milk and able to monetize what they produce. Project Misha is a second example in India, smallholder, small ruminant women's groups. And what they were able to do is increase animal health and reduce half the mortality rates in small ruminants collectively. And they also doubled their income, 50% of income increased within the project period. And the bigger success there was, based on that evidence, Bihar state government was able to sort of expand that program to 285,000 women in the state. So that is, a third example is sort of a transition to sort of traditional physical farmer organizations to a digital farmer organization. The example I like to share is Stellabs. It's an IoT, Internet of Things, to manage the dairy supply chain in India. And what they were able to do is, through their IoT platform, aggregate the demand, sort of really coordinate the logistics of offtake, and also continually improve financial services and improved, continuous improvement of breeds and whatnot. So, the farmer organization, as we know typically before, physical organization, cooperatives are now also evolving towards sort of being digital. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Samuel. Abebe, can I come to you next? We've been talking a lot about, obviously, in Africa, the need for more investment, the need for more support, and we've heard it from the keynote speakers this morning as well. And you're the Assistant DG for Africa for the FAO. Tell us about how and why are FAO's livestock development activities important for this continent, and what steps can countries take, considering that there is an expectation that demand for animal source foods is going to go higher?
Thank you. Good morning. Actually, the excellent presentations made by...
Abebe, could I ask you to speak closer to the microphone, please?
Is it fine? Okay, thank you. The excellent presentations made by the ladies this morning actually provides answer to the questions you've asked. It's about people. It's about people's livelihoods, in particular in the African continent. Agriculture is huge within the economy. Livestock within that agriculture GDP contributes between 30 and 80% of the agriculture GDP. So it's very, very important. Transformation of the sector is meaningful for many objectives. But most importantly, millions of people in rural Africa own livestock. They're owners. And these owners, they're women, the disadvantaged, the marginalized groups. Maybe it is the only assets they have. So livestock transformation is directly linked to the better life of these people. So whatever FAO does, it is not to do for them. It is to build partnership to support their efforts to transform their lives for better. Now, some of the important steps. I think the first step is to start with recognizing the centrality of these people. They are the owners. They should be the drivers. I'm very happy that she was emphasizing that they are part of the solution. That is the first step. We have been talking about over the last couple of days about the need to improve the productivity of livestock through improving the breeding aspect of it, the feed. I live in Ghana. The FAO Regional Office for Africa is based in Ghana. And the government wants to promote poultry production because there is a huge import of poultry, less quality nutrition, cheaper. Local poultry production cannot compete with imported chicken. So government wants to promote, to support producers of poultry. The biggest hurdle, the biggest bottleneck was feed, animal feed. So work on animal feed and further the need to strengthen the health system, the animal health system, using One Health approach and transforming the value chain. You know, in Africa now we are talking about Africa Continental Free Trade Area. If these communities should benefit from this opportunity, then we need to really support transformation for them to be efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, of course, more sustainable. The last point is about advocacy. Agriculture in general and livestock in particular do not have a lot of friends high in the policy arena. So it requires a lot of advocacy, policy advocacy. I'm glad that this was emphasized. We know from experience that initiatives that are led by presidents work better. To support the ministers of livestock and agriculture, for them to really engage with their colleagues, ministers of finance, with the presidency and so on. FAO supports that effort through providing data and evidence to inform them that investment in livestock transformation pays off. It is not a charity. Thank you.
Abebe, while I have you here, I have a quick follow-up question. Can you talk a little bit about the implementation of the 2015-2023 livestock development strategy for Africa? Because we're almost halfway there. So, where are we making progress and where do we still have challenges?
Thank you so much for raising this very important question. This livestock development strategy for Africa, it's an African Union strategy. I hope African Union participants are here. It was endorsed by the ministers of livestock as well as by heads of state and government. It is a 20-year strategy, as you said rightly, from 2015 to 2035. And by coincidence, actually, the development of this strategy was funded through the Gates Foundation. And it's very complete in terms of content, from the engagement of partners, aligning of existing initiatives, monitoring and evaluation, communication, financing. It's a complete document. It gives a very good example of why we should change course if we have to make any change. Breaking the cycle. We have an excellent development strategy that has a commitment and pledge by the highest political organ, the African Union Summit, and yet 8 years down the line, we are 2023, it was endorsed from 2015, there is no information on progress where we are. We do not have information if countries are utilizing this excellent strategy to inform the development of their national livestock strategy, because it's just considered as an end in itself. So let's take it from here. I would like to call on the farmers. I'm glad we have the representatives of farmers and pastoralists and other partners to take it. Perhaps one of the reasons why it's not being implemented is because the real owners of the strategy have been left out of the equation. We thought we're going to provide a strategy, give it to them, for them to implement. Maybe this is a time to change course for real engagement, real partnership. So, sorry, I don't have a good news for you. I don't think it has been implemented or used to guide implementation of national livestock development strategies in Africa in a consistent and coherent manner. We need to, and FAO, we like to offer our partnership, our platform. The DG, you have heard him during the opening. FAO provides a platform through hand-in-hand investment. For example, Kenya, I can give example. Kenya is coming up with a livestock development investment plan. The president is going to present it in October. And the purpose is FAO to provide this global platform for matchmaking, for enhanced investment, for enhanced advocacy for livestock development strategy. So let's use this opportunity, this conference, to go back to the development strategy, the livestock development strategy, and have a credible, true partnership with the real owners of the agenda, the farmers, the pastoralists, and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Bebe. Good call to action. Two quick questions to Samuel first, and then to Elsa. Before we ask conference participation, it would be great if you could keep your answers concise. Samuel, what kind of things are you looking for when you decide who to invest when it comes to private sector entities?
Thank you. We tend to, because we want to make markets function for the, neglected community. Like what we heard earlier on is, poor people are not beneficiaries. They are value-conscious customers and entrepreneurs. And if you treat them like that, markets can function. And so we don't have a specific criteria or list checkbox. And there is no one-size-fits-all. It depends on the situation. So largely, our hypothesis is the small-scale farmers are not optimizing their production optimally and realizing the economic value because markets have failed. And the large proportion of farmers will pay money for what they value. And the companies or businesses are not investing in this segment of markets because the risks and costs of doing business is high. And if philanthropic capital like ours could absorb that risks and cost, then we can make markets function or catalyze the markets to function. So that's our ingoing hypothesis. So we look for people with the right solution at the right quality and at the continuous supply and, sort of constant and continuous supply. And also, companies who have, by reputation and by practice, are able to comply with legal, regulatory, ethical standards in any country that they are operating in. So that is very important to us. And so, and then, to use an example, we go to multinational animal health companies, because you can't just do, as Robin said, you can't do one disease at a time. You need to have quality portfolio of products that you can deploy as needed basis. The other last thing I will say, I'll stop now, is we want to partner with partners who will fail fast. If the evidence is showing that it's not going to work, they will cut their losses and move on, so that we don't sort of drag the failing system. Or if it is successful, they will, with their own investments, will scale the solution rather than depending on philanthropic capital or donor capital.
Thanks, that's very important, particularly, I really like when you talked about failing fast, knowing when to cut your losses and change tack. Ilse, before we go to the conference participants, can I ask you to talk a little bit more about the International Year of the Camelids that's starting in 2024? I mean, you asked a question yesterday about camel milk as well, and I understand that you're in the International Steering Committee. What are you hoping to achieve with the year?
Thank you very much for that question, because, livestock is on a low rung of the ladder in agricultural development, but within livestock, the camel is especially low, and I feel nobody is, the large donor agencies have not been willing to invest. Maybe that's good, I don't know. But there is a lot of rationale to it, because no kind of livestock is better adapted to climate change. You can take the high temperatures. Pastoralist communities in Kenya, the Samburu, some of the Pokot, are switching from cattle herding to camel herding, and this is not small scale. This is a major movement. They're also, in terms of methane emissions, camels have lower methane emissions per kilo of product, apparently. And they are able to convert vegetation that is, very spiky, very salty, very thorny, and they convert that into this milk. And that milk is a very highly prized substance by the traditional camel herders themselves, but also in the international market. So in the US, you pay $20 for a liter of camel milk, and there it is appreciated also for its medicinal qualities, both in the East and in the West. In the West for autistic children, in traditional, also for diabetes, it helps with diabetes as well, and in traditional communities, it's supposed to help with resistance against diseases, against tuberculosis, also it works really well. And we need to make use of that. And in traditional communities, the camel is regarded as, somebody from Somalia was telling me, for us it's sacred. Other people say it's a gift of God. And in India, they treat them as family members and as members of the household, basically. So there are diverse groups across the globe who are keeping camelids, and this includes the one-armed camel and the two-armed camel in Africa and Asia, and it includes 4 types of camelids in South America: vicuña, guanaco, alpaca, and llama. And obviously they all have kind of different problems if you look, because they span such a large part of the globe. But they have come together and put out this statement on behalf of civil society. It's been signed by at least 20 organizations by now, and in which they emphasize that they actually do not want to follow the typical livestock trajectory of, just going for more efficiency, for more production, but they want to develop it in line with their own cosmovision and not go just for maximizing production, but to keep it in tune with the environment, to keep it in mobile systems and not subjected to industrialized livestock keeping. So I think we should support that if we can, and by adapting also the infrastructure to this situation. Rather than investing in big dairies, we need like a decentralized network of small-scale dairies. And that can do a lot, I think, for food security in arid areas.
Great, thank you very much. So you all know, if you wanted to hear about the International Year of the Camelids, or if you want to know more about the benefits of camels, you know who to look for, Ilsa. Now, we have a few minutes for participation from the conference audience, and we would particularly like to hear from people that who have not had a chance to speak over the past 2 days. I understand that Mongolia would like to make an intervention, so please go ahead. And if you could keep your interventions, your reflections, and your questions to 2 minutes, we would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mongolia, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Ayungirtun Kamolt, come from Mongolia. I'm a speaker of behalf of Mamanho Satnam. She is a Central Asian representative of World Alliance of Mobile Indigenous People and head of Nomadic Pastoralist Association of Mongolian Gobi. She has been carrying livestock for 60 years. So she knows very well nomadic and pastoralist life. She is pleased that Sustainable Livestock Transformation Conference on behalf of nomadic indigenous pastoralist people. Because the speakers and representatives made a speech a lot of challenges and solutions to the livestock producers all over the world. She said that we can implement successfully sustainable livestock transformation according to support small-scale livestock producers to improve their skills to produce livestock products with positive with environment. WAMIP will make all efforts for that sustainable livestock transformation through all members and representatives all over the world. And also, we have hope that FAO and the government representatives here will take steps for more specific policies to support pastoralists on the ground against land grabbing for mining, industrial farming, and our rights, especially now that we have head towards 2026 UN Year of Pastoralists and Rangelands. Thank you very much. Attention.
Thank you so much for your reflections, and thank you also for keeping it to under 2 minutes. We have time for perhaps 1 or 2 more. Yes, there's a gentleman in a jacket and there's a lady. Okay, and he is from Saudi Arabia. Can I come to you last, please? I'll go to over those 2, and then I think we'll have to then close, so thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sake Godana, a youth representative from Kenya, the southern part of Ethiopia as well. My question goes to Elsa, but first, as youths, we all know that youths are into science, technology, and innovation, and bearing in mind the importance of traditional knowledge, I was thinking of a hybrid between the traditional knowledge as well as the innovation and science could be a good intervention to bring us on board when it comes to issues of governance and resource access. And so my question to Elsa is that are there other interventions that camelid herders request to improve their livelihood to make the camel keeping more appealing and attractive to the younger generations? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll respond to the questions all in one row. There's a lady, I think, right at the back. Can you?
Yes, hello, thank you. I am Margarita Gomarasca from Vétérinaires Sans Frontières International. I have a question for Dr. Haile Gabriel. So we heard earlier a very passionate presentation about pastoralism, and we all know how important is pastoralism in Africa. The African Union endorsed in 2010 the policy framework for pastoralism development, and I would be very glad to know from you where we are about the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yes, salam alaikum. This is Faisal. I'm from Saudi Arabia. And actually, regarding the International Year of Camelids, we do believe that camels plays important roles in our regions. And we have a lot of things that we have done in the camel so far. For the camels, we have done the first snip ship in the world for designing the snip ship for the camels. We have targeting the trait of meat and the best milk production, and also racing. We have targeting like more than 14 breeds so far in our region. This is the first snip. If we can compare like the cattles with the camels, it's a huge difference. There is a huge gap. There is no work have been done for the camels. If you look for as a science, no work have been done for the camels. But we're trying to take this issue in our shoulder to handle it and to design this snip ship to help a lot of peoples use it as a genomic selections. This can give you like good details, good information, what's the best camels regarding the milk production, the meat production, the racing, also for the diseases. And inshallah, we will share all this information next year, 2024. We will having the biggest like conference for camelids. We can announcement this, I mean, a snip ship for all the country who interested in this part. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Now, to the speakers, okay, I see that there's one. We really have to wrap up, so if you could keep it very, very short, we will really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Caroline Schumacher. I work for GulfMed. My question goes to Robin Alders, or let's say I make reference to one thing she said, which I think is really important, and that is she emphasized the importance of basic animal health as a foundation for everything that we can do. This is the first time I have heard this during the last 3 days, and I would like to commend her for that. And in this context, I have a questions for the delegates. Our organization tries to develop vaccines that address diseases that affect particularly small-scale livestock producers. And the diseases are actually those are notifiable diseases for which there are government restriction on the use of vaccination. And we have an issue with vaccination coverage which rarely goes beyond 10%. It is absolutely impossible to ensure basic animal health if these rules are not being looked at. And I would like to make an appeal to the delegates to really look at the barriers that policies represent for allowing animal health management at the SSP level, your small-scale livestock level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I have an impossible task to our speakers, as well as Robin. I'm going to ask you to respond, all three of you, to the comments and the reflections in 1 minute, and including Robin. So who wants to start first? Abebe, Sam, Ilsa? Okay, 1 minute. Countdown starts now.
Okay, thank you very much for the comments from Saudi Arabia. It's really appreciated, all the research and effort that's being put in there on camelids, and I think you are quickly catching up with cattle research, from what I can see. But I must also emphasize that, as we heard from Mongolia and from northern Kenya, the people on the ground have actually other problems. They have problems with losing the access to their traditional grazing land. There's fences put up everywhere. They don't have camel health care. They don't have access to, they can't plug into value chains. So if we really want to, save the camels and support the communities, we need to address the situation that is there, and we need to listen to those voices, and maybe Saudi Arabia could help support the poorer camel herders in other parts of the world. I think that would be really wonderful. And we look forward to the conference that you're going to be holding next year.
Thanks so much, Ilsa. Bebe, there was a question from the Veterinarians Sans Frontières.
Yes, thank you. About the policy framework on pastoralism in Africa. Coincidentally, in my previous life, I used to work for the African Union, and this particular task of coordinating the policy development of policy framework for Africa was given to me. So I was very glad when it was asked. One thing that I want to reassure you is that the development process, it was really led by pastoralists, representatives of pastoralists. So their views informed the content of that policy framework. It's accessible online, you can go and check it. So there is no question about it. As I said during the previous intervention, this was again endorsed by the African Union heads of state and government. That's why it is an AU policy framework on pastoralism. Where we are in terms of implementation, again, it falls under what I have said earlier. The effort towards developing the policy framework was huge, important, but when it comes to implementation, I would say it's accidental. There have been, through the African Union Inter-Africa Bureau for Animal Resources, IBAR, there have been efforts to streamline the implementation of this policy framework in the countries. There have been some efforts. That was developed back in 2010, and now it's 13 years after. I can't say confidently that we have been consistent in terms of implementing it. But I think it is a very important instrument to really go back. Again, it's about advocacy. It's about ownership. It requires a lot of effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Baby. Sam? Okay, Robin, would you like to do a brief response? Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Very briefly, the problem is not vet services. We know we have a problem with vet services. The problem is with those who fund vet services. So we need to take the pressure off, but we do need to have data transparency. I think every country, if you're interested in One Health, don't just look at disease surveillance. Give your best estimate of your population data on those various livestock categories. Give your best estimate on what percentage is actually vaccinated, and then have a look at what the funding level is of those vet services. We need transparency and data to help those who allocate scarce resources to improve their allocation and also to improve cost sharing with farmers, because farmers aren't stupid. If it works for them, they will make a contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, before I give the microphone to you, Abebe said he had a final thing to add. 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because we talked a lot about why things could not work. I want to say one thing which is a good practice in the African continent, and this is about the biennial review of the Malabo Declaration. It brings into picture mutual accountability by heads of state and government for the decisions and commitments they have made. I think we need to use this as a good example towards implementation of those good continental level strategies. This is what I wanted to add.
Thank you. That's a good addition, accountability. Sam, final thoughts.
It's really good to discuss this, how we have to maintain a sustainable system that is suitable for everyone. And it's important that we don't derive policies and practices sitting here in a nice building. Instead, really hear from or listen to people who are working. And today, I was really inspired by your presentation this morning about pastoralists and listening to pastoralists. And I'm really hopeful that this conference has really sort of changed direction, and hopefully we can really make the most of the lives and livelihoods of livestock keepers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists, please? Thank you very much. Now, I know that was a fascinating discussion, but unfortunately we have the second part of keynote speakers and panel discussions to go to, so we really had to move on. Now, we're going to start the second part with the keynote speech from Kathy Watson, coordinator of the Livestock Emergency Guidelines and Standards. Now, Kathy has worked in international development for nearly 40 years, and some of it alongside pastoralists in Kenya, Uganda, and smallholder farmers in Ethiopia. Now, Kathy will be talking about the role of livestock in emergencies and how to improve the resilience of vulnerable livestock populations.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here on this platform, especially following some very inspiring speakers in the first half of this session. I'm going to focus on livestock and emergencies, in particular on the issue of resilience, putting that in the context of the livestock transformation that we've been talking about for the last few days, and that we all hope can be the future, but bearing in mind, as several people have mentioned already this morning and in the video, the fact that there are shocks and crises that are going to be working in the other direction. So according to FAO figures, just taking a quick snapshot and a reminder, which we probably don't really need, of what happens in the world, looking at the last year, 2022, there were 3 times more often natural disasters than there were in the 70s and 80s. Last year, there were 387 natural disasters. Over 30,000 lives were lost, 185 million people were affected, and 224 billion was lost to economies in that period. And as we know, low and middle income countries are the hardest hit in these circumstances. The drought that covered a lot of Africa last year, nearly 90 million people were affected. And in the Pakistan floods, in the same year, 33 million were affected. Over 1,700 people died, and there was 15 billion in economic damages. And as we know, these natural disasters are often exacerbated by man-made crises as well, including conflict and war. And as we recognize in this conference, livestock are the key productive asset for over 1 billion people. 70% of the world's poor depend on livestock for their livelihoods. And the impact of these disasters and emergencies on livestock, and therefore on the livestock keepers, varies depending on the type and the scale of the emergency. For example, in slow onset disasters such as drought, the impact on livestock can include the progressive loss of body condition, reduced production, drops in market prices, and eventual livestock mortality. And to take a snapshot, in Ethiopia last year, there were 3.5 million livestock deaths due to drought. In contrast, rapid onset disasters like floods or earthquakes can lead to sudden onset mortality at the onset of the sudden livestock mortality at the onset of the disaster, and then the loss of grazing, markets, feed, water, and so on, services. And again, a snapshot from last year in 2022 in Pakistan, 1.5 million livestock were killed. As was mentioned in the introduction, I work for the Livestock Emergency Guidelines and Standards, which is called LEGS for short, and it's a set of independent international standards drawing on evidence-based good practice. It's designed for the humanitarian context, focusing on small-scale livestock keepers, who have been very much the focus of this session this morning so far. And it provides guidance to design and implement livestock emergency responses. It grew out of concerns about the quality and timeliness of livestock emergency response. And it draws on the experience and the process of the Sphere humanitarian standards, which, as many of you may already know, are international independent standards for humanitarian response. And LEGS is a member of the Humanitarian Standards Partnership alongside Sphere and other standards. And we have partnered with FAO and a number of other organizations, some of whom are represented in this room, in this venture since we began in 2006. The LEGS Handbook was first published in 2009, revised in 2014, and the latest edition is being launched this year in English already, and French, Spanish, and Arabic will be launched in October. The handbook is made up of 2 sections. The first part focuses on general principles, decision-making and planning. Then the principles include some of the key tenets that we've been talking about already this morning: supporting livelihoods-based programming, ensuring community participation, and that's very much a question of partnership rather than beneficiary-donor relationship, as was already discussed early this morning. Supporting preparedness and early action, amongst others. There's also a set of participatory decision-making tools, and this is key for facilitating that partnership that is so central to effective livestock emergency response. This is followed by 6 technical intervention chapters covering the most common livestock-based interventions in emergencies: feed, water, veterinary support, shelter, livestock offtake, and the provision of livestock. And each of the 6 technical chapters includes standards, key actions, and guidance notes. LEGS is now used as a key reference in a number of regions within Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America by a growing range of international organizations, national governments, local NGOs, and community organizations. Turning to the issue of resilience, LEGS defines resilience as the ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover from adversity, be it a natural hazard or other emergency. Most resilience models build on sustainable livelihoods approach and recognize the importance that livelihood assets play in individuals' and communities' ability to withstand shocks and stresses. As noted in the LEGS discussion paper on livelihoods and resilience, livelihoods-based resilient emergency responses aim to address both the short-term needs, protecting assets like livestock, and at the same time to build the resilience of both the assets and the systems that support them against future shocks. So LEGS aims to support livestock keepers' resilience in 4 key ways that I'll just mention briefly. First of all, protecting livestock assets. And I'd like to add that when we talk about assets here, we're recognizing that the range that was mentioned earlier, referenced earlier on, the livestock to a lot of small-scale livestock keepers are, of course, a key financial asset contributing to household food security and income. But they're also a social and cultural asset. They are part of a way of life, and that was recognized very well in the earlier presentations this morning. Resilience, however, is much easier to talk about than it is to achieve, and that's particularly true in the midst of a humanitarian response. So at the very least, emergency response should do no harm. It shouldn't worsen people's resilience or increase their vulnerability to cope. However, at the same time, I think there are some things that can be done. Appropriate and well-planned emergency feed, water, shelter, or veterinary support interventions have the potential to protect livestock assets. This can help them survive beyond the crisis, and this protects livelihoods and therefore can contribute to long-term resilience. For example, in southern Ethiopia, one commercial livestock offtake initiative generated an average income of $186 per household, and some of this income was reinvested in livestock for the purchase of feed, for trucking animals to distant grazing, in order to protect those remaining livestock. In this way, the initiative helped to protect core breeding animals, and this contributes to the regeneration of herds after the crisis, and so supports future livelihood. The second way that LEGS aims to support livestock keepers' resilience is intervention as prevention. Intervention as prevention. Appropriate livestock-based emergency intervention can also act as prevention in terms of helping to prevent human food insecurity. For example, studies in Kenya and Ethiopia both found that the provision of livestock feed during drought had a significant effect on milk production. This helped to prevent acute malnutrition among children and thus reduced the number of children attending supplementary feeding centres. Third, supporting systems and services. Appropriate livestock-based interventions can protect and support not just the livestock themselves, but also the systems and services that are required to sustain livestock production. And this can help support livelihoods in the longer term. For example, the use of vouchers or other forms of indirect cash response for for feed responses or for veterinary support helps to maintain existing small-scale private sector services, such as feed supplies, private veterinary pharmacies, or community-based animal health workers. Finally, LEGS emphasises the importance of preparedness and planning prior to any emergency. Livestock interventions that are appropriate are based on contingency planning using participatory responses that draw on livestock keepers' existing knowledge and perspectives. And we've heard some forceful and appropriate reminders about how the wealth of knowledge and experience that's already there in pastoral and other livestock keeping communities, and appropriate livestock responses need to build on and connect with those. And this enables early action in response to crisis. Another example, again, talking about commercial offtake, commercial livestock offtake, it's a good example of the benefits of early action, anticipatory action, to use the new phrase. One study calculated that commercial destocking was 165 times less expensive for a donor or an implementer relative to the cost of restocking lost livestock after a drought. Effective preparedness thus increases the probability of effective emergency response. And in recognition of this, the new edition of the LEGS Handbook has 5 new standards on preparedness in 5 of the 6 technical chapters. To summarize in conclusion, there is a significant body of evidence to show that good quality livestock emergency response plays an important role in protecting and rebuilding livestock assets. This can contribute to maintaining livestock keepers' resilience and increasing their ability to withstand future shocks and crises. The LEGS Handbook, the training program, and the other resources that we have draw on good practice around the world to support this process and try to contribute to better lives of livestock keepers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kathy. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. If you have any about the LEGS or the new handbook that Kathy mentioned. Okay, I see there's one at the back. Is there another one? There's 2. Okay, we'll take those 2 and then together, and then Kathy can respond. Yes, ma'am, please. No. Oh, sorry, just a second. Okay, sorry, I think he accidentally started first, so we'll go to you first, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you very much. Kathy, it's great to see you. Lovely to see you at this forum. I am Jackson Z with 4 Paws International. I have short questions for you related to animals and disasters. So in the face of escalating disasters intensified by climate crisis and the potential impacts on people, livelihoods, planetary health, food systems, and farm animal welfare, how can we prioritize proactive disaster preparedness alongside response measures for sustainable farming communities, integrating local knowledge, inclusivity, cultural diversity, all these while addressing UNEP's triple planetary threat, the nexus of animal welfare, environment, and sustainable development, when in many countries, animals, or not all animals, are included under the protection of the national disaster legislation, which means there's no responsible authority, no budget, no expertise. Then how can private sector, small farmers, civil society collaborate on building this resilience? And how can global farming financing be strategically linked to prioritize disaster preparedness over response recovery, avoiding the perpetuation of the conditions that worsen disasters, of future disasters? So this is in line with UNDRR Sendai framework mandate that protects animals as productive assets in disasters. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Good morning. I'm Anna Mary from Brook, an animal health and welfare NGO. We specifically focus on working equids. I just want to say thank you to Kathy for emphasizing the importance of livestock and disaster resilience, and I'm pleased to say that Brook is using the LEGS guidelines and standards in our work. And what we found is that the key issue really is to work with governments to include livestock and also working equids, obviously in national disaster risk management plans. So we have worked, for example, with governments in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, and now livestock are included in their official national level DRM plans. And our team have recently witnessed a drill in Nicaragua where it was incredible how smoothly it ran. People were evacuated alongside their livestock, and there were provisions for feed and shelter. So my question is really, what can we do to convince other countries, other governments to follow suit? Because it is clear to people in this room, I suppose, but maybe not to everyone, that without their livestock, people cannot rebuild their lives and livelihoods following a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you both for those broad-reaching questions. I'll have a go at answering them. I think something you both touched on is the importance of policy and advocacy, and that was mentioned, I think, by the panel in the previous session. I think there's a clear need for advocacy, both for recognition of the contribution of livestock to agriculture and to national economies, the value of animals and their animal welfare issues in that context. And then within that, we have the importance of folding in the disaster response. And I think that's partly where the triple nexus comes in. And I think one of the things, when we added these new standards on preparedness, one of the things we were trying to emphasize is something that the position that LEGS has taken all along, but is that you can't separate out humanitarian response from long-term development, particularly when you're talking about supporting livelihoods, that you need to have preparedness, contingency plans, working in partnership with communities, with local groups, to work out what do they want to do, what do they normally do when there's a disaster strikes. And I think it's increasingly important to recognize that for both slow onset and rapid onset emergencies, there is time. We don't know when the next thing may strike, but we can be reasonably confident that it will in a drought-stricken area, in an earthquake-prone area, and so on. And we can make those plans to try and prepare and to build on what people have been doing and to be ready as much as we can before the crisis starts. And that can happen at community level, and then we need the advocacy at national level. In terms of how we can share information, I think that's part of the advocacy. I think case studies, one of the things we're keen to do is to develop case studies about institutionalization of LEGS and LEGS principles, but also the broader principles underpinning LEGS in different countries. And share those. We have a very good example from the work of the Brook, which Anna works for in Nicaragua, where they've been working with SINAPRED, which is the National Disaster Management Agency, to integrate concerns about livestock management and animal welfare into their disaster response. And we'll be sharing that case study and others. I think that's one of the key ways that that LEGS can contribute. Obviously, there are broader ways for other networks. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Kathy. Can we give a round of applause to Kathy, please? Thank you. I'm now going to invite Ezra Dika Yilmaz, who's the Global Lead for Sustainable Protein Investment Services at the International Finance Corporation, IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group. Now, for the past 2 decades, Ezra has been working on investment, joint investment advisory projects, and developing new business across all regions that IFC operates. She's going to be talking about the importance of investing in small-scale livestock producers.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I'm just looking at the screen because we were going to have a little video before I start. I guess.
ወይዘሮ መኪያ መኮንን እባላለሁ። የቢሾፍቱ ከተማ ነዋሪ ነኝ። ያደግኩትም የተማርኩትም የተወለድኩትም አሁንም እየኖርኩኝ ያለሁት እዚሁ ነው። ባለ ትዳርና የ3 ልጆች እናት ነኝ። እንግዲህ ወደዚህ ወደ ዶሮ ስራ ከመግባቴ በፊት በባለቤቴ ደሞዝ ነበር የምተዳደረው። የሱ ደሞዝ ብቻ ስለነበረ በወቅቱ እንደዚህ በጣም የተጋነነ ኑሮ አንኖርም። ከኢትዮ ቺክን ጋር ያኔ ነው 2010 መጨረሻ ላይ ነው የተገናኘነው። በ1500 ዶሮ በጫጩት የአንድ ቀን ጫጩት አምጥቼ ነው የጀመርኩት። ለበዓል አሳድጌ ሸጥኳቸው።
Ethio Chicken started 13 years ago with the purpose of making farmers healthier and wealthier. Our vision has always been to provide one chicken per person per year into Ethiopia. And we're continuing to work very hard to achieve that goal.
የነበረን ብርና አሁን ያለው ልዩነት አለው። በፊት ያው የደሞዝ ያው መስሪያ ቤቱን ጥሎት ሲወጣ 3500 አካባቢ ላይ ነው ደሞዙ። አሁን ላይ ግን በዶሮ ስራ ከ50 እስከ 60 ሺህ ብር እናገኛለን በወር የተጣራ። ሲቀጥል እሱም መኖ ቤት አለው ብያለሁ። እዛም የዚሁኑ የዶሮቹን የሚያክል ትርፍ እናገኛለን። ስለዚህ ምን ማለት በጣም ሰፊ ልዩነት አለ ኑሮ ላይ ዛሬ ትናንትና ዛሬ በጣም ከፍተኛ ለውጥ አለ።
Many of them have managed to build viable businesses. They have sent their children to school. They have managed to provide for their families. And these are truly entrepreneurs who have seized this opportunity and have continued to improve their life as a result of that.
ዶሮ ስራን ስገልጸው እኔ በጣም ማለት ለኔ ህይወት በጣም ትልቅ ቦታ ያለው ስራ ነው ማለት አሁን እንደው ስራ እንኳን ሌላ ባስብ እኔ ከዶሮ ጋር ተያያዥነት ያለው ስራ ላሰፋው እችላለሁ እንጂ ከዶሮ ስራ ውጪ እንትን የምለው ነገር የለም። በቃ ለኔ ትልቅ ቦታ አለው። በቃ ኑሮዬን ለመኖር በቃ ደህና እየኖርኩ ነው። ምንም ማለት የማያሰጋኝ ኑሮ እየኖርኩ ነው።
Thank you for watching our video. This is an IFC client, Ethio Chicken in Ethiopia. I wanted to start with this because it's a great example of how we can invest in a livestock company and help change the lives of smallholders. And I thought it would be a good segue to our conversation today. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll be talking to you about how IFC and the World Bank are creating opportunities for people-centered development in the livestock sector. But first, introduce myself and IFC. IFC is part of the World Bank. We are the largest development finance institution exclusively financing companies, private companies in the developing world. And within the World Bank, we share the dual goal of shared prosperity and eradicating poverty. I'm the global investment lead for sustainable proteins. In my team, we cover investments in dairy, aquaculture, and other animal proteins and livestock. We know that investing in agriculture can provide pathway out of poverty for millions of people. It also provides a more food-secure future and stronger climate resilience. This is why agribusiness is a priority sector for IFC. And this is why we have invested $12.5 billion over the last decade in agribusiness. Just last year alone, we invested $3 billion in agribusiness, and of which $230 million was invested in livestock companies around the world. We work with our client companies to raise agricultural productivity in developing countries, but also support public policies that protect the most vulnerable small-scale farmers. Our host FAO estimates that livestock contributes 40% of the global value of agricultural output, and that it supports the livelihoods of and the food and nutrition security of almost 1.3 billion people globally. Yesterday we heard the importance of animal source foods in the health of people. In the very first day, I heard the Director General emphasizing the scarcity of animal source foods. He mentioned that in some countries, children cannot even find a cup of milk to drink. Some of you may have even heard that in the new research published by the Lancet, that it's wide decided with a hidden hunger figure of 2 billion people globally is actually a major understatement. The analysis found that over half of the preschool children and 2/3 of women of reproductive age are missing a major micronutrient in their diet. They either miss iron, zinc, or vitamin A, all of which can be provided by animal source foods. I believe that investments in livestock are key in preventing this kind of malnutrition and also getting people out of poverty. I'm sure it comes as no surprise to people in this room. In developing country context, there's a large informal sector, but there's also a small but fast-growing formal sector. In the large informal sector, for example, 80% of the milk produced in Africa and in India is consumed raw. It never goes to processing. Most of the pork in Vietnam comes from small-scale producers, and the majority of buffalo in Thailand is not grown for its milk or its meat. It's used for the plowing on the farms and as a store of wealth. The best way for us to invest in people-centered development in livestock and support this large informal sector is through public sector programs supported and informed by the World Bank. The World Bank has a large livestock project portfolio of about $2 billion. And the request for their investments in livestock sector has been increasing. It increased from $150 million about a decade ago. Now it's $700 million a year, a 4 times increase, more than 4 times. The World Bank supports and guides investments in the livestock sector where it has the potential to move the needle toward the bank's mission to reduce poverty and inequality and towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to give you 2 examples from the World Bank projects. World Bank has recently launched a $500 million livestock productivity and resilience support project in Nigeria. This project aims to strengthen the resilience of and livelihoods affected by the farmer-herder conflict that you may have heard about, as well as to improve productivity and commercialization of targeted livestock production systems. Another World Bank project example is from Bangladesh. It's another $500 million livestock and dairy development project. It is improving the agricultural productivity and market access for 2 million smallholder farmers and small agro-entrepreneurs. The project aims to stimulate growth and enable a sustainable, inclusive, and safe development of livestock value chains in the country while mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. These World Bank designed and delivered projects are essential for food system transformation and the sustainable development of livestock sectors in countries where the informal sector dominates. At the same time, the formal sector is growing at a phenomenal rate in developing countries. We recognize the sustainability challenges of investing in livestock sector, and that's why all of our investments at IFC follows the practices for sustainable investments in private sector in livestock operations. And we are very happy that 5 largest multinational development banks have also adopted these practices. These practices cover anything from animal welfare, biosecurity, use of antibiotics, decarbonization, and traceable supply chains. At IFC, our current animal protein portfolio is a little over $1 billion. In every project we finance, we seek opportunities to increase efficiency, to make meat and dairy production more efficient, and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions intensity. This reduces the demand on resources and the climate impact. We talked about that at length in the first day of the conference today. The private sector companies that we invest often rely on thousands of small-scale farmers to supply them. These companies have a powerful mechanism to build on the livestock keepers' own initiatives and efforts while helping adopt climate-smart technologies and knowledge. Our aim is to create a strong and resilient small-scale farmer that can produce more efficiently and can manage production risks. We all know the risk management is not simple in livestock sector. This is one of those sectors where you can lose all of your assets overnight. And it's very seldom to see that it can happen. You can lose all your assets overnight by a disease, by a bird. We heard Mekia's story. Our philosophy is to work with with our investee companies, private sector companies, to build capable farmers, to have strong credit performance. I believe this is the first step for better livelihoods. Here are I would like to give you some examples from IFC's work to improve inclusive and resilient supply chains in livestock. In Uganda, IFC is supporting Pearl Dairy. Pearl Dairy buys milk, raw milk, from 10,000 small-scale farmers in rural areas. It sells processed milk to underserved communities. IFC was able to train these small-scale farmers, and they were able to increase their productivity by 63% and achieve better quality milk. As a result, in fact, their livelihood, their incomes increased by 44%. Another example comes from India. It's in the poultry sector. IFC's client Suguna Poultry has long-term relationships with 40,000 small-scale farmers. Suguna provides them chicks, vaccines, feed, veterinary care. We talked about that at length also in the previous speeches today, and medicines on credit as part of these outgrower contract packages. And IFC's follow-on investments in Suguna are now enabling the company to expand into Bangladesh and Kenya. And I believe this inclusive model will work there as well. And my final, and our first example was Ethio Chicken, and I'd like to provide that as our final example. Ethio Chicken in Ethiopia. Following a successful grant from the Gates Foundation, IFC implemented this project to increase the availability of affordable and quality day-old chicks to the farmers. We helped professionalize Ethio Chicken's distribution system of improved poultry breeds and also feed to 300,000 small-scale farmers such as Mekia. This successful advisor project also paved the way for IFC to invest local currency funding to Ethio Chicken. These are just a few examples from IFC and the World Bank, how we support more resilient, sustainable, and equitable food systems. So in summary, I know that everyone in this room agrees that we need more investment, both in the public and private sector, to improve the livelihoods of small-scale farmers. We at IFC, together with our colleagues at the World Bank, are working hand in hand with private and public sector players in the livestock sector to move the sector to a sustainable path, strengthen efficiency in production, and create growth opportunities for small-scale farmers and integrate them into the global value chains. So I would like to, if you'd like to learn more about our approach, please join our side event. That is happening today at 12, together with lunch at Sheikh Zayed Center, and where we'll be discussing our approach with the World Bank, with EBRD, with FMO, and the Gates Foundation, how investors can work with private sector companies to ensure sustainable livestock development in emerging markets. I look forward to seeing you all there and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ezra. I just want to reiterate that there will be the event from the IFC about investment. We don't have time now for questions, so I hope you will attend the session in the afternoon at the side event at the Sheikh Zayed Center to ask any questions that you might have for Ezra. Thank you so much. Now, our final keynote speaker is Babafemi Oyewole. Now, he's the Chief Executive Officer of the Pan-African Farmers Organization, and Babafemi will be talking about how to foster synergies and trade-off between livestock production and better lives with real-life examples from the field.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank FAO for inviting PAFO, the Pan-African Farmers Organization, and giving me the privilege of sharing my views on the topic that has been given to me, synergies and trade-offs between livestock production and better lives. And before I do that, I want to briefly present PAFO. PAFO is a member-based farmers organization with 5 networks and 73 national organizations across 43 countries in Africa. This morning I heard that, Samuel talks about digital farmers organization. Yes, digital farmers organization is coming up, but again, Dr. Abebe also mentioned that one of the mandates of farmer organizations is advocacy, and I know that the digital farmers organization might not be able to do advocacy effectively as we are doing. Coming to the topic, we see that the livestock sector is very important, as have been generally stated by all the speakers since the beginning of this conference. And why? It's because of its impact in improving the livelihood and survival of human population in the world, particularly in developing countries. And it is estimated that over 1 billion smallholder farmers depend on the sector globally, and numerous employment opportunities are provided for the people who are engaged in its market value chains. And now, what are the, talking about synergies of livestock? As we look at the global importance of livestock sector, we see that is having a lot of opportunities in terms of the earth surface. We are told as 29% of land and 71% of ocean. And if you look at the space that livestock is using, if we go down, we see that 77% of agricultural land is being used by livestock, while 23% are being used by the crop. And somebody said during this conference that most of the time importance is given to the crop section, with the livestock section being not adequately emphasized, whereas they are the ones that use most of the land. So we see, in terms of synergy, we look at the synergy between livestock and food systems. Number one, we see livestock help to alleviate seasonal food variability. We know that small animals, particularly small livestock, are slaughtered as the need arises, and the meats are preserved. And when the food, the crops have seasons, on off season, it is these animals that are relied for protein. And again, we see that it's a source of income, has been emphasized by all our speakers here, that it provides income for the rural farmers who are engaged in them, and not only for food, but also for agricultural inputs and seed and fertilizers and the pesticide. For instance, we are told in Niger and Burkina Faso, approximately 80% of the population is involved in livestock production. And on average, livestock contributes to 40% to the GDP. And this was also mentioned this morning. So not only that, it's also a source of employment generation. So we see that dairy is very labor-intensive activity, and it involves women in both production and marketing. So labor typically accounts for over 40% of total cost in smallholder systems. So livestock product processing sector has also been identified as contributor to employment generation and reduction of rural-urban migration. Not only that, we see that some, like I think Dr. Abebe also mentioned this morning, that a lot of chicken are being imported into Africa. That means that a lot of foreign exchange is being spent on this importation, and the production of local livestock will help to reduce the amount of foreign exchange that is being expended on these importations. And again, it's used as waste for fuel. In many countries, cow dung is highly valued as a fuel for cooking and heating, and reducing the expenditure of fuel wood or fossil fuel. So it's very important, and it, in fact, it represents the major source of fuel supplied to household by millions of farmers in developing countries. Also, we see that it helps in biogas production from manure, which is an excellent substitute for fossil fuels or for fuel wood for farmers in tropical countries. So we see these synergies among between livestock and food systems, and it's a source of fertilizer and soil health that provides fertilizer for the crops. The integration of livestock and crops allows for efficient nutrient recycling, and animals use the crop residues such as cereals, straws, as well as maize and sorghum straws and groundnut hulls as feed. We see also it's used as a source of weed control. What are the trade-offs? Well, there are positive and negative trade-offs between livestock production and food systems, and also invariably better life. Number one is the livestock and climate change. This has been well emphasized during this conference. But the linkages between livestock and climate change are two-way and very dynamic. On the one hand, climate change has significant impacts on several aspects of livestock production, such as feed quantity and quality, animal and rangeland biodiversity, distribution of diseases, management practices, and production systems and changes. On the other hand, livestock have impact on climate change through emissions of greenhouse gases. The climate change impacts of livestock production have been widely highlighted, particularly associated with rapid expanding industrial livestock operations in most countries that are also linked with the deforestation through feed production and pasture expansion in many of the countries. Also carbon capture. Significant amount of soil carbon could be stored in rangelands or in silvopastoral systems through a range of management practices suited to local conditions. This not only improves carbon sequestration, but could also turn into an important diversification option for sustaining livelihood of smallholders and pastoralists through payments for ecosystem services. Livestock and biodiversity. Livestock have widespread direct and indirect impacts on biodiversity, which is defined as the number of and diversity of genes, species, and populations and ecosystems. And also it affects land use change. And we have been told this morning and along the conference that the conflict between the livestock, the herders and the farmers is because of the competition for land, available land. And deforestation also has been identified as one of the effects of livestock. But as we are told this morning that the livestock, the herders are not the problem. They are actually the solution if they are brought into the table to discuss the problems together. Now, what are the, how can we say that livestock production and better life are related? Number one, we see nutrition. We see that livestock production will bring improved nutrition that will enhance the welfare of the people for better life. According to the African Development Bank, 216 million children in Africa are affected by undernutrition and stunting, and over half of all children or all child fatalities on the continent are caused by inadequate nutrition. In fact, they estimated that the economic cost of poor nutrition is estimated to be around 11% of the GDP of Africa annually. And again, we need inclusion, has been also emphasized. We need every stakeholder to be brought into the table, to be included, particularly also the youth and the women who are involved in the value chain, so that as the FAO has said that no one should be left behind. Also, productivity. Investment is needed, as has been emphasized by my preceding speaker, to boost livestock productivity in terms of the quality of field range and grazing land rehabilitation, introduction of improved forages and civil pastoral systems, and the enhancements of the herd. And finally, is sustainability. That is building partnerships and collaborating with all stakeholders so as to promote the sustainability of livestock production for a better life. Finally, we must, for livestock to be production to be sustainably transformed, we need to do things differently. We need to also operate at scale in terms of investment in livestock production, using relevant science, research, and development and technological innovations. There should be improved access to new technologies, credit services, and information resources for farmers, so that they will be able to adopt these new research outputs and blend them with the traditional way of doing things, so that to bring out the best productivity for their activity. So there's their need to support small-scale food producers to conserve animal genetic resources for livestock production, so as to guarantee a better life that leaves no one behind. The panel that is following us will be able to bring more insights into these discussions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Babafemi. We have time for one or two questions directly related to Babafemi's presentation, if you have any. Okay, I don't see any, but I think Babafemi, you will be here hopefully for at least a few more hours or for the rest of the day if anybody wants to follow up with you. Great. Thank you so
very
much. Ooh, careful. We're now going to have the second panel discussion, and I'd like to invite the speakers on the stage, please. Diane, Maxwell, Manish, and Joe. Hi, Manish. Me too. Hi. Great. So let me just introduce you based on proximity. So to my immediate right, we have Jyotsna, or Joe Puri, Associate Vice President of Strategy and Knowledge at the International Fund for Agriculture Development, IFAD, and one of the sister Rome-based UN agencies. Next to her, we have Diane Burgard, Head of Sustainability, Wholesale and Rural, and Global Head of Food System Transition at Rabobank. And next to Diane, we have Manish Shah, Chairman of the National Dairy Development Board of India. And next to him is Maxwell Sibansana, Deputy Director for the FAO Office of Emergencies and Resilience. Again, we're going to have 2 rounds of quick questions, and if you could keep your answers as concise as possible, that would be great, so that we can also have more, interventions from the floor. Joe, can I start with you first, because you lead IFAD's, work on strategy and knowledge. What advice do you have for countries on how important it is that they have information on livestock and, specific benefits for having livestock identification systems?
Thank you so much, Chair. Such a privilege for me to be here. So just by way of background, the International Fund for Agricultural Development works very closely with countries in doing loans to countries. So they are really demanded by countries to work in the agriculture and in the rural sector. And in this context, what we do, so 15% of our overall portfolio has livestock components in them. But that's disproportionately small, given that 2/3 of the overall agricultural systems and smallholder farmers especially are involved in livestock. The key challenge for us, before I go into providing advice on identification systems, is really finding large and scalable bankable projects that can really bring about large-scale impact and are able to absorb the kind of lending that IFAD is used to doing. In terms of animal identification systems, clearly it becomes really important to track and trace, to figure out, sizes of breeds, to understand where livestock are located, to understand rotational and grazing patterns, to understand as to how we can provide disease and surveillance support, as well as to ensure that we are really managing well on the ground. We worked, for example, in Kyrgyzstan to ensure that there is rotational, there are pastoralists who are doing rotational movements to ensure that we've got sufficient pastures to feed livestock, but it means that you've got to have data on feed and fodder. I can give you more examples, but the key thing is really working with farmers organizations, producer organizations that are able to aggregate this, provide us with information, and work directly with identification systems so that we are able to use this in the design of our investments on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you, Jo. And I guess, like you said, it's also really important when it comes to things like emergencies to identify and trace where they are, right? Manish, I want to come to you next because India has had huge success, right, when it comes to the dairy sector. But going forward, as we look at sustainable transformation, where do you foresee the biggest challenges and what India is doing to address those challenges?
Thank you very much. As you know, India is the largest milk producer in the world. And in India, livestock or the dairy sector is not only the business, it's about the livelihood being provided to more than 80 million farmers who are directly connected with the sector. And 85% of these farmers are actually small and marginal. So it's the big socio-economic development which is happening. And National Dairy Development Board of India, through its Operation Flood program, actually initiated this journey. India was a milk deficit country, and then we joined the dairy farmers into the cooperative movement. And today, in fact, today is the foundation day of NDDB, 27th September. We are completing 58 years. And this journey from the milk deficit country to not only self-sufficient, but also the largest milk producer in the world is, span over last 58 years. And we have empowered the farmers. Today, if you see the milk, it's the largest agriculture commodity in the country. If you combine the output of wheat, paddy, sugarcane, all three major crops, milk is perhaps still the more in terms of the output. And apart from all this, what we have achieved in this journey, I think challenges are there. The biggest challenge which we have, so although we are the largest milk producer, we also have the largest number of bovine in the world. So 300 million of bovine consisting 200 million cow and 100 million buffaloes is a challenge because the productivity of this bovine is very low. And we are trying to tackle this challenge. We also have a challenge to provide feed and fodder to all these bovines. So that is the another challenge. And we also have the similar challenges which we have been discussing about the sustainable livestock going forward in terms of climate change, in terms of the greenhouse gas emission. And Government of India, and NDDB. Together we are working on tackling these challenges through various programs and policies by the government. The main is the National Disease Control Program, where we are providing free vaccination to all the bovines 2 times in a year, the FMD vaccine and also the brucellosis vaccine. It's provided free of cost. We are also having a program for making available the feed and fodder under the National Livestock Mission. We have the infrastructure development programs going, like the National Program for Dairy Development or Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund. And through all these policies, we are trying to tackle these challenges. One of the other challenge, because we are a smallholder dairy farming system, unlike the other countries, we have a challenge of information gap or end-to-end traceability, and that we are trying to tackle through the National Digital Livestock Mission. And we are trying to have ear tagging of all the bovines and getting the information. So almost 280 million bovines are now tagged, and we are getting the information on a regular basis. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Manish, and happy birthday to the NDDB for their founding. Maxwell, how does the choice of livestock species has any impact in terms of the resilience of the sector, or within the country or within the region? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you so much for that important question. As already has been shared by different speakers, the viability of any livestock enterprise depends on environmental factors, the choice of the livelihoods that are viable within this particular location, and also the economic value, but also the cultural and socio-economic factors. So the choice of the species is critical, because the investment that you have to make to just bring in any livestock species is significantly even higher than for crops, and we therefore need to ensure that we bring something that would be adaptable, something that would bring value, both economic and cultural, to a particular community. And FAO has a number of global programs that are seeking to make these choices a lot easier. And I can highlight the Emergency Center for Transboundary Animal Disease program, which is seeking to strengthen the institutions that support the testing of any diseases, and also ensuring the extension services are in place. The Emergency Prevention System for Animal Health, which is a big data system that also is monitoring and can be used as early warning, but also be used to do some trend analysis with respect to what are the emerging diseases that might affect the choices of the animals or the species that can be brought into a particular location. The Emergency Management Center, which coordinates the emergency response in the case of any livelihood shock that might affect livestock. And also, most recently, the Livestock Investment Coordination System, which is bringing everything else together and making sense of the information that exists, and ensuring that we know who is doing what where, what is viable where, and what are the networks of services that are available to ensure guidance that can be provided to different farmers that might have an interest in livestock within their company.
Great, thank you so much, Maxwell, for explaining that and what FAO is doing as well. Diane, you bring a different but no less important perspective from the private sector. We've heard over the past 2 days that the public sector allocates, sort of fewer resources when it comes to livestock. And is that because, livestock is considered sort of like a private business, or would you advocate for more investment, in the livestock sector from the public sector? And if you would advocate that, where should the public sector invest in?
Thank you for the invitation and the great question. Let me go back to picture a broader context. Food is on the agenda of most state leaders, not just in middle and low income countries nowadays, because of food security and the discussion we have on nature. And since 1960, new technology and a very input-intensive approach has led to a huge scale and cheap food that is more affordable, more abundant, more convenient. And World Trade Organization and open trade has facilitated to produce food in a lot of countries which are blessed with water and land, and being able to export it to consuming countries which are not that blessed. Nowadays, 25% of the food is being traded cross-border, and that is in itself already unsustainable. If you now see that supply shocks are imminent and geopolitical tensions are rising, everyone is rethinking their strategy on food. And to make the sector more robust and nature resilient and even restoring nature, that demands a complete different role of a farmer. And in order to respect nature and to produce in a more sustainable way, we have to rethink our system. And as this is a perfect storm moment, so to say, it is one of the most important questions in the new system is what will be the role of the farmer, and how can we find mechanisms to reward the farmer in a way that they are becoming more resilient and they are part of a positive, profitable economic sector. 300 billion is needed as investment in the sector. The private sector can't do that alone. So it is very important to set up that system so we can make investments to protect nature and to make farmers potentially part of the system to guard nature as well. So it is important that we rethink the role, and policies, I think, together with private sector are needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane, for giving that broad picture of why we need to have more public sector support and investment. Now, before we invite conference participants to get involved, I'd like to ask another round of questions quickly to all the speakers. And this time around, I'd actually like you to focus on your recommendations. And I'm going to start with the ladies first. So, Diane, can you suggest some important policy interventions that countries can make to attract particularly youth in the livestock sector?
The Dutch government has recently announced to make 100 million available for young farmers. On the other hand, there are also compensation measures for moving farms. This probably gives the best picture that funds alone are not enough. It's really about the long-term perspective. The average age of farmers is 68 in Japan, 60 in UK, US, Australia, 50 in Europe. So that alone says something about how can you attract talent. And it's not just an economic question or consideration, it's also about social and the long-term perspectives. So I think coming back, we need to make sure that it will be a sound and economic profitable sector.
That's a great point. Joe, we have, as you know, a lot of government representatives from developing countries. What are some of the quick wins that you see for these countries when it comes to improving the availability of information around livestock?
Thank you so much, Chair. So if I might just actually piggyback on Diane's response. I think one of the key challenges that we are seeing in the sector is definitely the lack of investment, whether it's with surveillance mechanisms, whether it's with ICT, whether it's with management techniques, but even R&D and innovation. And we've heard many speakers speak about that. I think the first thing that I would recommend to governments is to really think about creating these unified platforms where we can bring in the private sector as well as the public sector, but not to miss out the farmers on the ground. And so, I call, well, at IFAD we call it the 4P platform, where you have the producer be part of the overall spectrum in terms of partnerships. So it's private-public producer partnerships, right? And that's where you can really bring in the perspective of the smallholder farmer and ensure that, yes, you've got investment mechanisms and platforms that are catering to the farmer on the ground. Taking off again on the point that Diane was making, if you have integrated platforms where first loss capital is provided by organizations such as IFAD, such as FAO, such as WFP, then you've got a mechanism where the risk, the asymmetry in information, the small scale, the typical small scale investment opportunity that you have on the ground gets taken care of by public organizations such as us and helps us to aggregate these investments to a far larger scale, which then allows the private sector to come in to see this as a profitable enterprise. The third part of this is really ensuring that you've got a norm. You've got a system which recognizes the huge environmental, social, and governance attribute of this sector, which is relatively unexplored. So for example, we're looking at low methane livestock, and that we are collaborating, and I know that there were remarks yesterday about from the Global Dairy Platform. So we're collaborating with them, and they're a key partner for us to look at 4 countries where we can not just work with microfinance institutions on the ground and insert and expand their equity and liquidity so that they can on-lend better. But we've got to, through those actions, we are also inserting overall targets for these microfinance institutions and local banks so that they are on lending with a focus on women, with a focus on smallholders, with a focus on indigenous people, and with a focus on otherwise vulnerable parts of our farming communities globally that get neglected by the financial system. My last point is about financial access. So as I said, whether we are working in Indonesia, whether in the Philippines, whether in Pakistan, whether in Tajikistan or Tunisia, we are showing, and this goes back to the first question that you asked me, we are showing with credible evidence what the overall impact of livestock-related investments is doing, not just to production and to output, but also to the incomes of farmers. Because by building inclusive value chains, and that's where IFAD really comes in, we look at inclusive value chains, and we are able to show anything from between 18 to 120% increase in incomes and production as a consequence of investments in inclusive value chains. And I think that evidence is really important for organizations that are data-driven and want to see that, yes, there is going to be a return on the investment, which is related which is again, pivoting the private sector to realize that it's not just the risk-return attribute of an investment that you've got to look at. You've got to look at the third one, which is impact. Thanks.
Thank you. 4 Ps, not just the PPP, but also the producers. Maxwell, the question I have for you is actually linked to the previous question around livestock species, because there's this balance to be made, right, between investing in a single highly productive species versus having a multitude of species and indigenous breeds, because one probably improves productivity, but the other could be a really important coping mechanism. Where's the balance? What would you recommend?
Thank you so much for that question. We are faced with many choices in terms of the support that we provide, but also that goes for a single producer. When you look at the risks that affect most of the producers that we work with, you have to realize that many of them are motivated more by risk management. In other words, they would need to have breeds or a species that will survive the most within a particular location. And yet, there could also be others that have covered this risk either through the scale of production that they have made, and they are ready to venture into a breed that is more productive. But as we know that as we breed for productivity, we lose maybe adaptability characteristics, which means that the management level will be a lot higher And the training that needs to be provided for will have to be a lot higher. And the risk of loss, I think, as the IFC speaker highlighted, that with a single breed, often if there is a disease, you could have a whole herd wiped out. And yet, with that breed as well, it opens you up to significant markets that are lucrative. It also opens you up to the technical support that is specialized. As you specialize on one breed, on one species, you gain more, and your management system with respect to the logistics is a lot easier than when you are dealing with multiple species and multiple breeds. But the choices, therefore, have to be made to strike that balance, categorizing the different producers based on the objectives that they have and based on the capacity that they have and the additional resources that they might need to keep, say, this highly productive breed alive. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Maxwell. Manish, last point from you. Any lessons that you could share with us on making sure that there are economic benefits that are both equitable and inclusive?
Thank you. I think perhaps what we have realized for the socioeconomic benefits in the rural area, the best form is the cooperative institutions. So forming cooperatives or collectives of the farmers, we are able to provide more than 80% from the consumer revenue back to the producer. I think nowhere in the world you will find such a large proportion of the consumer revenue going back to the farmers. It's only because of the collectives or the cooperatives which we have formed, who are working on a very large scale. The another factor is, I think we'll have to see that the dairying remains as a sustainable livelihood option. And for that, government has many programs simultaneously going on to see that the mandate of the sustainable livelihood option remains the same, and for which we have various animal health, animal breeding, and animal nutrition program, which are aimed at supporting the farmers. And last but not least, I think to provide the additional revenue to the farmers, we have been seeing milk as a only revenue parameter. Now we have started focusing on dung. And dung, we all know it has inherent fuel, inherent fertilizer in it. And we have started now propagating large-scale, small biogas plants at the farmer's backyard. It captures the methane we use for the cooking care, cooking requirement of the family. And the remaining bioslurry is converted into organic fertilizer, which is again helping the farmers for the manures and improving the soil fertility. And we are providing additional income. So again, the women collectives are taking this bioslurry at a cost. We are providing money to the women beneficiaries. And then the profit earned from this fertilizer is also plowing back to the farmers. And the women empowerment, I think, which has happened in our country, whether it is leadership positions or their involvement, since 80% of the activities in the dairy are anyway being taken care by the women. And now with the digitization, we are helping them more by transferring money directly into their bank accounts. So this has also empowered women, and dairying is the best example of women empowerment.
Great, great. Those are great examples. We have a few minutes because we really need to wrap up very soon, and we also have closing remarks that we'd like to hear from our chair. So if you have any comments, okay, I see that there is definitely one. Can I get a show of lights or hands on who else would like to make reflections, particularly from people that we have not heard of, people that we haven't spoken so far? Okay, we have three. We'll take all three at one go, and then we will then give it to our speakers to respond, and then we will close. So the gentleman at the back, would you like to start? Yes, please.
The delegates will speak in a Russian language, please. No.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники конференции. Меня зовут Зедула, фамилия Пираназаров. Я являюсь научно-производственным центром животного советника. Пользуясь случаем, хотел бы искренне поблагодарить ФАО за успешную организацию первой глобальной конференции, посвященной животноводству. Хотел бы особо отметить яркое вступление спикеров и делегатов. Я тоже хотел бы коротко поделиться нашим опытом. Значит, Узбекистан является одним из крупных государств региона Центральной Азии. Население Узбекистана составляет более 36 миллионов человек, при этом ежегодный рост прогнозируется около 750 тысяч человек. За последние годы в стране реализованы более 2000 проектов животноводства, в результате чего создано 160 тысяч постоянных и сезонных рабочих мест. Для реализации проекта были направлены средства в размере 150 миллионов долларов международных финансовых институтов, как и Азиатский банк развития и ИФАД. В целях поддержки животноводства государства ежегодно хозяйствам выделяется более 50 миллионов долларов субсидий. За этот период было привлечено 360 миллионов долларов средств международных финансовых институтов, в том числе кредиты французское развитие, агентства развития и Всемирного банка. Мы понимаем, что животноводство является одним из важнейших компонентов агропроводственной системы, но есть другие факторы. Животноводство не очень рентабельная сфера. Увеличение продуктивности при одновременном снижении затрат невозможно без повышения эффективности. Вопросы, обсуждаемые вчера, сегодня на этой конференции, например, выбросы парниковых газов в сфере атмосферы, биоразнообразие, нагрузка на земельных водных ресурсов, требует особых глобальных подходов, диалога и консенсуса. При этом
sorry. We're trying to sort out the technical issue. Apologies. Well, this is a new development. We're trying to find out what is causing it. Okay. Apologies, please.
Okay.
So could you finish in the next minute? Thank you so much.
При этом считаем необходимым учитывать природное расположение, демографию и экономическое положение каждого региона при реализации международных проектов в будущем. Мы готовы всесторонне сотрудничать с международным сообществом и решение вопросов животноводческой сферы Республики Узбекистан. Спасибо за ваше внимание.
Okay, I have just been told that this is actually not an FAO. I think there is a national alert. I think it might be a testing going on. So that is what it is. So, sì. Ah, sì, va bene. Yes, so the FAO building is absolutely fine. Do not be alarmed. And apologies for this interrupting your speech. Botswana, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let me also take this opportunity to thank FAO to have organized this very important dialogue on sustainable livestock transformation. This could have not come at the right time because currently we are engaged in a lot of challenges. Agriculture, particularly livestock, plays a very important role in most of African countries' economy. And in my country, it used to contribute immensely to the GDP. But of recent years, that GDP contribution by livestock has gone down to as little as 2.2%. However, it continues to plays a very important part in the socio-economic development of our people, as it employs a lot of the population, most of the population. So our government has come up with a robust initiatives to revive the livestock sector because of the challenges that we are faced here in our country due to drought, disease outbreaks. The national head population has gone down over the years. That's why we see our government coming up with a robust initiative to revive the livestock sector. Of recent past, you may be aware that we have gone out to purchase the best genetic, animal genetic material in the United States, being live animals. We also have gone to other European countries to source the best genetics in terms of semen. And we're hoping that this will greatly improve the national head in terms of quality and numbers. We are happy to be part of this dialogue, and we believe that with the lesson learned from the participants, the conference participants, we'll take them forward and see how we better improve and transform our livestock sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Botswana. Yeah, okay. I think if you switch off your phone, I think it might actually help with the sound. Animal Task Force, if you could keep it very, very short and concise, we would really appreciate it as we really need to close. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I was interested from the panel about, with the importance of ESG, how to balance different indicators of sustainability making investment decisions, particularly with the importance of not just carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus balances, but biodiversity net gain, social justice, as well as obviously financial return for the investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suspect, Diane, you'd be in the best place to answer that. But then afterwards, if I can also give all the speakers very, very short, less than 1 minute, final thoughts and remarks, that would be really appreciated. Diane?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As you know, financial institutions are implementing ESG requirements in their investment policies. Rabobank is flirting with the idea to introduce a true pricing model to price all externalities in the price of food, which is a significant increase in pricing, so that comes with effects that we have to take into account as well. But it is important to get the right decisions to weigh them all equally, so income, return, sustainability are a triangle that needs to be taken into account on each and every individual credit decision that we take.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you. So as part of closing remarks, two figures are, I think, really important to bear in mind. First, only 3% of overall climate finance actually goes to smallholder farmers, and smallholder farmers are disproportionately those that are dependent on livestock for their income and for their consumption and nutrition needs. Second, less than 2% actually overall goes to smallholder farmers in terms of international assistance. So it becomes really important to consider as to what we are doing to increase the productivity and the innovation that we are seeing in this sector. And my last message is really a clarion call for evidence-based and data-determined decision-making. Unless we have the kind of surveillance systems and animal identification systems and evidence systems that can tell us what works, what doesn't, for whom, why, and how much, we're not going to be able to take this to scale. Thanks.
Thank you. Manish, final thoughts.
I think just a concluding comment, thanking FAO for providing this wonderful opportunity, holding such a conference for the first time where we are able to cooperate with different countries and also using each other's, leveraging the expertise for the public good. We are trying to make, I think, the transformation in the sustainable livestock sector going forward. So thank you, FAO. Thank you.
Thank you. Maxwell?
Thank you so much. Just to highlight that given the important role of livestock in the livelihoods of many of the people that we support, as well as the high cost of stocking or restocking, it is critical to make use of the systems that are already in place, either in national governments, in our different partners, in FAO, to make the right choices of which livestock species that we're going to invest in. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so we're going to have to close. And I would like to actually invite the chair for this session, Arianna Giuliadori, Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization, for her closing remarks. Yes, you can make those remarks from the chair. Perfect.
Thank you very much to all the speakers, the panelists, the experts. I began the day by wishing all of us to get inspired by the conversation, and I feel grateful for the quality, the depth of the inspirations we are all getting. I would like just to flag a few elements that emerged during conversation. Well, clearly, it's not a picture in black or white. There's such a complexity that it is inextricably interlinked in what we are discussing. It's a picture in which the past and the future are together. And we heard, for instance, somewhere that, the pastors, for instance, are already nurturing the very modern idea of circular economy. That's what we learned this morning, and that we should invest on that kind of approach. It's a world where traditional innovation should find a different way to live and to give fruitful solutions to the farmers. We heard it also from the audience that probably the answer that we need is a combination of digital transformation and very pragmatic local solutions. We learned during the first part of the day about challenges a lot. Access to resources. I want to go back to that. And I want to highlight something that Paulina told us. If we don't make livestock profitable, we will not make it attractive to the youngsters. So all of this reflection, how can we promote a renewal of generations in agriculture, is meaningless if we don't tackle the economic sustainability of that. And that's why it's so important, and this panel was amazing for that, to talk about access to finance. And what kind of finance? Thanks, Joe, for flagging that only 3% of climate finance, and in general, only 2% of the financial assistance goes to smallholder farmers. That's a real issue. So what can we do to ensure, and I mean, the witness of the IDC was interested with this regard. How can we have experiences like Eat Your Chicken becoming a reality in many places all over the world? But how can we make sure that the money goes to farmers, to producers? Because we do, as farmers, understand that it's much easier and safer, probably, to pass resources to governments for public programs directly when they tackle very small economic initiatives. But can we build a system that is delivering and making sure that we're able to measure if those resources are getting where they are needed? That's also something that is still open after today. And actually, to close very quickly, I don't want to close, I want to launch a call for action to all of the stakeholders here. It's clear that to achieve a better life, we need a better involvement of farmers, pastoralists, herders, smallholder producers through their organizations. And the answer to the how and the why we should have farmers' organizations, this is the question that we must ask the farmers, and the farmers, they will tell us why they need to get organized in different ways to advocate for their own interest. And we must support them. And what do we have to achieve? 3 things. What we hope we will achieve are farmer-centric, science-based, and very pragmatic, synergistic solutions. That's what we all hope for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arianna. Thank you. Now, before you go off for your lunch breaks and the side events, the organizers just have a few messages. Number 1, today is the last day where you can go down to the atrium and look at the exhibition of 12 success stories of successful transformation in the livestock sector. The people who are part of the stories will be there between 1 and 2. So please go down, talk to them, hear their stories. Number 2, at the Sheikh Zayed Center, there's a side event that Azra talked about earlier, how multinational development banks can approach sustainable investment in private sector livestock operations. That's going to start from 12:30 and last an hour. There'll be a light lunch. And last but not the least, the closing plenary session will start at 2 p.m. sharp. Both myself and Chris will be here. So see you later, have a great lunch, and don't be late for the closing plenary. Thank you. Please give a round of applause to our panelists as well, please. Thank you.